we'll get started. Welcome, Amanda.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Thanks for having me, Francis.
It's a pleasure. We've had a lot of people keen for our episode, so keen to dive into it. So, Amanda Jundi, you run a clinic.
That's right.
And you're a child psychologist?
Yep, I'm qualified educational developmental psychologist, actually.
Yeah, awesome. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself, sort of what your work entails?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we do see people along the lifespan, but I've specialised in children because I've always had this passion for working with children earlier on and helping them manage the issues that they come up or that are confronted with earlier on in childhood, in order to prevent the long-term effect as adulthood or in adulthood. So that's what my passion was driven by, addressing the early on childhood challenges. So that's where my business picked up, and I'm now currently in private practice, and I work with a lot of individuals with a vast range of challenges, some anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress. Currently what we're seeing an influx of disabilities coming through, autism, ADHD, and that's grown substantially, and that's what our work does. We support families and children through their challenges.
And how long have you had your own clinic for?
My own clinic, outside working for other people, I'd say about 5 years now.
5 years.
And it's going well.
Was it tough to get started sort of on your own, or do you sort of already have a base of people that you were working with?
I'd say it was a little bit nerve-wracking initially, taking that big step initially to go out on your own.
Yeah.
Especially when you've been under other people's businesses before and just going with the flow of what they want to do. Certainly a lot more pressure now.
Yeah.
Having your own business. It doesn't stop.
Why is there a lot more pressure?
Doesn't stop.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weekends is, do I take that phone call? Do I take that message? It's you put a lot more in knowing that it's your business, because people now know you as a person, and they want to talk to you, whether you've got other therapists or not. They want to talk to Amanda because that's who they called to book in with.
Yeah.
So we're slowly breaching out into getting them to feel more comfortable in making connection with the individual therapist rather than Amanda who owns Quantum Psych. And partly that started was because I was a one-man show initially. And so people, when they started coming in with the referrals, it was, I want to make an appointment with Amanda.
Yeah.
And now it's, can we make an appointment with Amanda? It's like, well, no, Amanda's not available at the moment. Can we make another appointment with one of our therapists? And so we're starting to change the culture there. But, yeah, it took on a lot of pressure initially.
Yeah, it's always hard, especially when a business is tied to a personal brand so much, to sort of undo that and reframe people into understanding that, like, whatever you believe and how you treat and your approach, you've sort of tried to make sure that permeates through all of your therapists.
We do that, and I've got a great team of therapists at the moment, and I rely heavily on them and trust them that they are doing a fantastic job with our families, and we refer to our clients as our families. This is not a one-off appointment and you just forget about them and they go. We've had some clients with us for about 3-4 years. And we've seen children from diagnosis right through to starting school and some of them transitioning to mainstream classrooms. So we've seen different stages of individuals' lives and the changes that they've made. And it's a beautiful journey.
And a lot of your work is with children with disabilities, you mentioned?
At the moment it's been that. But like I said, we get a range of referrals. But the demand for disabilities at the moment is supporting families in getting the child to the right stages of life and the right interventions and services. It's been really important. Diagnosis, that journey on its own is quite daunting. They come in and they've got a referral and we think this child might exhibit with this. Can we investigate this further? And it just starts from there. It's like, well, yeah, we've just assessed.
So you're involved in the diagnosis process?
Yes, we certainly are. We do the assessments. So a lot of the times we might get a referral from a paediatrician or from a speech therapist, an occupational therapist, behaviour therapist. And they'll say, this child's exhibiting these behaviours. We're a bit concerned that it's beyond maybe anxiety, beyond ADHD. Is there something more to it? And then that's where we start our journey of assessments. Yeah.
And so do you provide that assessment to a paediatrician who then makes a diagnosis, or do you diagnose yourself? How does it work?
It all depends on what that referral is requesting. Obviously, when we get the referral, it's generally because a paediatrician or another specialist is querying a diagnosis. So certainly we do send back that assessment assessment report back to the provider or the referring doctor, and that's where it all starts for them. But yes, we do start, and we have a heavy input in the diagnosis. Some doctors would rather have an ADOS and ADIR for an autism diagnosis rather than go off observations. When they come to us, we will do an intensive clinical history. We've got them in the session for 2 to 3 hours where we do a ADOS, which is the Autism Observation Scale. I mean, people might look at that assessment and look and think, well, they're just playing games, but it's not. It's really beyond that. It's seeing how does this child who's been referred for an autism diagnosis come in and interact with some of the toys. Are they quite repetitive with the toys? Do they fixate on one toy over the other? Do they have any repetitive movements, repetitive plays? Do they engage the therapist or the one parent in the room in anything at all? Do they respond to their name? What's their communication like? As opposed to, and with all due respect to all providers and all specialists out there, you go to a paediatrician or a psychiatrist, you're sitting there for, I'm going to say, 40-minute session, and you talk a little bit and you might fill out some paperwork and then you've got a diagnosis. Some people don't feel comfortable with that concept, and even some professionals don't feel comfortable with that, and they will request that assessment to come through. It provides data.
So you mentioned some of the things you look out for. What is a typical assessment for autism? It's called an AOS, is it?
ADOS. ADOS is the observation scale where they come in and we've set the room up with modules for the child for us to be able to observe their interaction with different toys and even with the therapist and the parent. And then that's generally coupled with an ADIR, which is the autism interview with the parent. So it's a very intensive assessment. So our observations on the ADOS, then a clinical interview with the parents and the ADIR, that generally correlates over in the same assessments. The scores pretty much tell us a lot of information and data. And then we'll say, this is substantial evidence to suggest that there is autism there. Yeah.
I mean, autism's always been a little bit controversial, as you'd probably be aware, in terms of what's out there online. I'm sure a lot of your families also come to you with a lot of concerns about things they've heard. So, I mean, I guess the biggest thing I've heard is whether you're sort of born with it or it's something that's developed or a side effect of something else. Yeah. What is your current understanding of
the way I would explain
the cause?
The way I would generally explain it to a parent that would have the same question when they come in with that referral is, well, you're generally born with autism. It's a genetic makeup. And so people say, well, could it be the immunisation? Because we noticed
the whole vaccination causes autism thing, I've never really looked into it. I have no idea.
I respect their perspective and that they feel that it might be the immunisation, but there's also a lot of evidence that suggests the reason that people might make that connection is because at the age of 18 to 2 years, the immunisations take place. But also that's when we notice the autism exhibit or develops more evidently is because we're looking out for communication. And if that communication is not coming through in the child at 2 years of age, then we've got to say there's something there. And along with the behavioural issues that come up as well, that, well, they're exhibiting these behaviours. And at 2, we're looking out for them. But at 2, they had the immunisation. So is it immunisation or is it just because you were born with autism? My evidence and research that we've looked at when we're considering these diagnoses is that, no, it's a genetic makeup and you're born with it.
But it just becomes more sort of apparent around the time you expect them to speak because they're not speaking.
Well, they're not all typically speaking before 2. So, whether they're echoing your words or not able to communicate or talking gibberish or not responding to their name, we start looking out for that part of the developmental stages. Is that from 2 on? Before that, we're looking, are they rolling? Are they sitting up unassisted? Are they able to lift their head off the ground? Are they able to move from their back to the tummy, from the tummy to the back? They're all before the age of 2. But then after 2 and on, we're kind of looking for those communication and behavioural challenges that might come up and say, there's something that's just not right. They never looked at us when we try to engage them, when we were feeding them, or they'd just be in their own world but not talk, play quietly. And hence today we have this issue where people say, he doesn't even have any behaviours. He's so quiet. Well, yeah, maybe that behaviour is also predisposed because of the autism. So that's what we do. We investigate this further.
And is it possible that a child might, not start talking till 3 or 3.5 and not have autism or any other issue? Could just be a slower development?
Absolutely. There's language delays that come into play, and this is why we do emphasise on an autism assessment in order to rule that out. But the autism assessment isn't alone. We also request that a speech and language assessment is done. We request other assessments be done as well to make sure that we're not just jumping into the diagnosis of autism. You know, being nonverbal doesn't mean you're autistic. It could be a language delay or a communication delay, which sometimes speech therapy will help. Sometimes it's selective mutism. You know? Selective mutism is not autism.
What's selective mutism?
Where they get highly anxious and are very selective in where they share to communicate.
Right. Yeah.
So you might have kids that go to school and a teacher's never heard their voice.
Wow.
They get picked up in the car and they're talking. So that's what we refer to as selective mutism. And we get referrals or reports back from teachers saying, you know, we're concerned about, you know, autism. But no, this kid might have anxiety and therefore his selective mutism's coming into play there.
Right. Could it be just also maybe there's social interactions generally are quite minimal and so going to school was really
Absolutely.
overwhelming and things like that?
Another factor that we need to consider as well. But this is why our diagnosis doesn't always just stick to what we observe in the session. We engage teachers, professionals, other therapists, parents,
To
and our
understand the whole
observations.
context of the
Absolutely.
child. Yeah.
This is a heavy diagnosis. It's not something we say you're able to cure. It's something you learn to live with. So you've got autism, but it doesn't mean that you're not able to have opportunities or you're not going to be able to function. Some of them are absolutely amazing and some of them have challenges, but they also surprise us with every milestone that they make.
Yeah.
And it's not a disability in the sense that there's no ability ever to happen. It's just going to happen at its own pace. And that's what we like to encourage parents that walk out of our sessions in believing that, you know, it is a diagnosis, but it's about how we're going to work with this diagnosis so we can see this child or this adult be able to lead a fulfilling life with consideration given to their needs. That's all.
Just learning to live with it.
That's it.
So given that autism, it's not really a binary thing. It's more of a spectrum. Some people might have it more than others, correct?
Well, we know there's the 3 levels. So we've got level 1, 2 and 3. And a lot of the level 1s, people say, oh, I don't have autism. What are you talking about? It's like, well, they do. But autism doesn't mean you're not able to communicate and function. They can, but they might be a little bit awkward in the way they do communicate or they don't necessarily know how to hold a conversation where it's flowing or it's maybe inadequate in the way they engage you in that conversation. They might be a bit quirky or a bit upfront and that people don't necessarily take very well.
Yeah.
Then we got level 2 where they struggle a lot more socially. They don't have a lot of interaction and they don't necessarily enjoy being around others. They prefer to keep on their own, more of an introverted person and they function quite well in doing things on their own, but just don't put them in a setting where they feel uncomfortable because it's the minute they are uncomfortable, that's when you might see and they might exhibit a bit more of those behaviours. Then we got level 3, which are a little more challenging. And there's a lot of work involved in that. A lot of work involved in order to get them to move along with the strategies you're teaching them. But that's not to say you can't move that level 3 down to a level 2.
Okay, because that was my next question. Can you move them along the spectrum ever so slightly?
Certainly.
And is it based on how early you intervene or not necessarily?
Well, we'll target that question in 2 parts there. I think it's really important to note that we can move them down from the level 3 down to level 2. We also hope not to see a level 1 move up to level 2 and 3. That's likely to happen when we don't have early intervention in place or strategies are not being implemented to assist this person with the level 1 to meet their goals and be supported through their challenges. So we kind of just left them just to find their own way or say, oh, you know, that's it. They've got this diagnosis, therefore nothing can be done. It's not the case. There's got to be a lot of work involved there. And with the more work, the more control you have over the progress they make and the milestones that they do make rather than a regression. We're seeing stability and consistency in their progress. Okay, but that's not to say that they'll never have autism again. They'll always have autism. It's just they've learned how to live with it. And society today is learning how to live with it as well, a lot more than what we had before.
Yeah, look, I've always had sort of my criticisms of society in terms of how it views mental health, but there has been a positive in that there's a lot more openness to talk about certain issues and how we can cater to people who are dealing with those issues. Whereas if we go back a little bit, you know, it probably wasn't the case.
That's right.
So
it's really important to know that help is out there. Before, no one used to talk about it. now it's so out there because there are a lot of issues out there that people are not able to cope with individually. They need that help from other people and external services. We get clients that, reach out on a weekend. We aren't working on a weekend and we may not see that message. And they rely on knowing that they've got that person external to the family that they usually see that are non-judgmental, that are there to hear them out. And they reach out to you on a weekend because they know they've got that. It's just amazing to be able to feel that you've got that influence in someone's life, that they feel that they can come and tell you things at the time when they felt they had no one before. And
about something as important as their child's well-being.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I know we speak about putting boundaries in place around therapy and clients contacting you outside of hours, but this is what makes us connected with our families, is that they're having such a hard time because their child's had a meltdown or the siblings just had a massive panic attack because the level 3 autistic brother has just demolished the house. So I'm not going to stop at this sibling's not my client. I would go through that phone call strategies and do the grounding strategies with him in order to calm him down. And that might have to be after hours, or that might have to be on a weekend. But that is exactly what keeps us connected to our families and what makes people believe that, these diagnoses don't just stop at the diagnosis. There's not a full stop at autism, full stop, ADHD, full stop, or intellectual disability, full stop. The sentence goes on, and it goes on for as long as you want it to go on. And you can have points in there, but allow it to happen and allow others to know that you're available for them.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for that because we do live in an age where there's a lot of clock watching. Oh, it's 5 p.m., can't help you anymore. Deal with your own problems at home now. But to go sort of above and beyond, it'd probably mean a lot to your families just to have that semblance of almost hope in that moment,
I can confidently say, I think if you asked any of our families at the organisation that I have, Quantum Psych, is that we don't stop at just a service. It's like I said earlier, we are families. And families are there for each other. And so that's how we build our relationships. We build these relationships. If a parent asks me for a video of me reminding them how to use their inside voice because they've just been picked up from school and they've been trying to settle them down for an hour, but the strategies that I do in session help, then I certainly do send that video and get her to use it with the child. And it works. It actually works. And I'm happy for that as long as I know that I'm able to walk off saying, I feel good that I've helped this person. Or that next text was, oh my gosh, she settled. I'm like, wow, that's really good.
And look, it might take you a minute to do that, but you'll relieve them of the next 5 hours potentially, however long it might be.
Francis, even if it didn't work, at least that parent knows we tried our best to be there for them.
Yeah, for sure.
Support's really important.
Yeah. So your clinic, Quantum Psych, and where's it based?
Bankstown.
In Bankstown. So your clinic being in Bankstown being a very multicultural, a lot of Middle Eastern people, etc. As someone who's Middle Eastern, are you Middle Eastern?
Yes, I am.
You're Middle Eastern, right? So you know of the sort of stigmas associated with getting help. And how have you found navigating that with the population there? Because it's very different. I mean, I'll give you an example in my family. One of my siblings, his daughter was probably starting to speak a little bit too late and he was just a bit uneasy. And it's just like, just go ask someone. You take an hour out of your day, just find out. Maybe there's something they can do. Maybe there's a very small fix to what is a very small problem, or if it's a bigger problem, get onto it. And that wasn't really the mindset of our parents' generation and before that.
That's
it was just, there's nothing, there could never be something wrong with my child. It's like, don't look at it as something wrong. Just see it as maybe there's a way they need help that you potentially can't.
That'll be ideal if we all had that mentality, right?
Yeah. So how have you found navigating that?
Honestly, I've seen a big shift, especially now, we've mentioned autism specifically today, but big shift in even the ADHD diagnosis or intellectual disability diagnosis. Parents have it, and sometimes it's about psychoeducation. They've got this referral, they've seen a pediatrician, he's flagging concerns. Psychoeducation is foundation. You speak to these parents and you tell them, well, we're assessing for this and what it means if he does have it and what supports are available. And obviously guiding them through that if support is not being taken advantage of, or if you're not utilising, the supports that are being provided and early intervention, that we're not going to be helping this young person move along and make goals and gains in and reaching the goals eventually. So they'll come in, and I had one parent, for example, say, I don't want a diagnosis disclosure. I never want him to know he's got autism. And so my conversation was with them, well, I can respect that, and that's fine. But what
was the sort of reasoning behind that?
Again, just not accepting the full diagnosis. It's a bit hard with
like a
the
form
culture,
of denial, yeah.
The culture that I don't want anyone to know he's got autism, or I don't want him to ever know he's got autism. And so we stopped that diagnosis disclosure with her at that quote, and I said, can we just talk a little bit about why you would think that? And she said, I just don't want him to have an excuse or anyone to give an excuse for behaviours. And I said, well, let me tell you, can you drive without a licence? And she said, no. I said, can I practice as a psychologist without a licence? Absolutely not. So we need a licence to do certain things. So when we give this child this diagnosis at the right age and time, it is very imperative that they do have a diagnosis disclosure. Whether you share it with them or not, they know they're different. So I said, you need to consider making a shift in that mentality, because we need them to understand. We speak about society understanding and being compassionate and making adjustments, but we're too scared to share this diagnosis with the person who owns it.
Yeah.
It's quite ironic.
Yeah, it is.
This is them. And it's their diagnosis and they own it, but we're too scared to share it because we don't want them to have an excuse, but they do. They have a license.
Yeah, and there's probably a lot of confusion for them navigating the world and realising their difference, but not understanding why.
They know it.
Yeah.
They feel it. They see it. They know they're not doing things that others are doing or why they're not fitting in. And it's not about getting a label. This is not what we're talking about here. People say, it's not about the label. Absolutely not. It's not about the label. But unfortunately, it is about understanding why the behaviours are there and what's happening to this young person for them to be displaying these behaviours, so that you can understand it and others can understand it as well. There's a fine line between he's a naughty kid or he's just struggling to communicate what he's feeling.
Yeah.
Big difference there. So having a diagnosis is important. That next step is, at the right time, it's important to get them engaged in their own diagnosis, because they need to know what they're going to do as young adults in the future to follow through with these supports as well.
Yeah. I guess there's two extremes. You've got on one end the people, mental health issues don't exist. My kid is fine. Don't tell them there's anything wrong with them. Then on the other side, I suppose it's the more everything is a mental health issue, and there's a reason for every person's action that's related to their mental health. I suppose you're trying to get them in the middle, where it's like, hey, we can still identify it, let them know, but work with them to be able to overcome the challenges and not use it. I suppose the fear is, in that case, that it will be used as an excuse. And I can sort of understand where that's coming from, because it's almost like how depression and anxiety sometimes are diagnosed. And it's like, you don't want these things to govern a part of your identity or become your identity, I should say. Like,
absolutely.
So you can understand the fear, but you don't want to go in that extreme, because then they don't have any support network.
That's right. But this is why I said I totally respect your opinion on this. And it's just a perspective. And I can respect the difference in opinion there between mine and her views. But it's very important to know that we're not talking just about taking a label and saying, I've got an excuse to do what I need to do. It's about when I want to fulfill a task and I'm finding it hard to do. Let's just take kids at school, for example. If no adjustments are being made at school and your teacher's saying he's not learning like other kids, and you say, well, help him learn. What are you kind of saying? Yeah. You're almost saying, make adjustments.
Yeah.
So the teacher says, well, we're learning in the classroom. It's a mainstream classroom. We're conducting the lesson. There's no diagnosis there. She's running the lesson. She doesn't know there's anything there.
Yeah.
So as far as she's concerned, she's there to do a job. She's doing it. But this kid's displaying behavioural issues. But we don't want to share that with either the school, because we're worried about the label that they've been given or the diagnosis that they've been given. It's not about not wanting to share it because I don't want people to judge or hold it against my child. It's about, well, if my child's in that setting and we need adjustments to be made, let us help society and community to make those adjustments.
Yeah.
Because then if we're not, we're depriving this child or young person of an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow. And this is what we're trying to change, that stigma behind, we don't want people to know that they've got autism. You can't have autism. That's not acceptable. Or ADHD. What's wrong with it? You're still functioning. but you just need adjustments. And it could be as simple as me, Francis, giving you 10 tasks now and you just processing 5 of them. So if I know you've got ADHD, I'll say, well, you know what, let's go with 2 tasks. When you finish those 2, come back and I'll give you another 3.
Yeah.
Then what we're doing is we're building that sense of accomplishment. The self-esteem and confidence goes up without allowing people involved in your child's condition. And again, I respect people's perspective on this. I mean, it's very individualized, but without allowing people to understand how they can help your child, they're not going to be able to help them. They're not going to be able to make those adjustments, which is going to put your child further and further along with making progress.
Especially when it's a condition which isn't as apparent as, say, other conditions. Like if you were, based on the levels you described, someone with level 1, it might be subtle enough most people don't pick up on it. And so some parents are like, oh, the longer we can sort of hide this. But it's weird. It's ironic because
interesting you say
they're
that.
trying to protect their image, but really they're depriving potentially their child an opportunity to manage. They might regress into other levels. They won't be provided the same opportunities to learn and grow, etc.
It's interesting you just said that, Francis, because we get a lot of this from schools. We get it a lot from external providers, and they say, you know, there's no way this kid's on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why are you saying that? And they say, well, he just doesn't exhibit them. He's not doing this. He's not doing. I said, well, there's different levels.
There's levels, yeah.
And then we talk about masking now, especially in girls. Masking. They can mask it because they look around and they know they don't want to stand out. And so they will mask, for example, a whole day of a great day at school. But the minute they're picked up after school, you see the behaviours come out because what they've done is they've bottled it up all day and they need to have an outlet. And the outlet is when they get picked up because that's their safety zone. They're not going to be judged. People know what they're like at home.
How interesting. So they can withhold whatever behavioural urges.
And mask it. This is what we call masking.
And why is it more apparent in girls?
Girls are more nurturing and gentler in nature than, say, boys, right? So girls will look around and just blend in by being quiet. Boys are a lot more active and out there, and so they're extroverted more than the girls. So they will show the behaviours coming through, and the girls will look around and think, well, I don't want to stand out different to my friend, or I don't want anyone to think I'm a little odd. We're talking about level 1 kids here. With, you know, average IQ, we're able to navigate what's appropriate versus inappropriate. And so they will mask it, and they can, because by default, girls are just quieter and more gentler. And so people don't pick it up.
See, that's something I never knew about people with autism, is that they're actually self-aware of the things they're doing that might be perceived as odd by people around them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wow.
And just to give you an idea about why understanding clinically the background behind a child's diagnosis from, say, early development over through to the lifespan, say, for example, a 13-year-old child now, they were diagnosed, for example, at 4. And, you know, we've reassessed now because there was questions around the intellectual disability of this child, intellectual ability or cognitive strength and weaknesses. So we've done an IQ test. And so we've got an associated diagnosis here now. We've got intellectual disability, which is the primary, and then autism, which is an associated diagnosis. And you'd get someone that's higher end, receive this file, say, for example, from the Department of Education, that's maybe screening through whether the child should be granted a position in a support unit or not. And they'd look at this report and they'd say, oh, but the teacher's scores are not aligned with the parent scores. And it's like, well, that's right, because the teacher doesn't know the child as well as the parent. And secondly, kids at school, we know they do mask a lot more, and at home than themselves. And so we base our diagnosis on that clinical history that we collect and previous reports and diagnosis. Someone at the department sitting behind a desk has no privilege to this documentation.
Yeah.
And they make a judgment and they'll say, oh, this child doesn't have autism, and they'll question that diagnosis. And then the parents are feeling like they have to justify why they had those scores in the report. But this is something the paediatrician gave them from when the age of 4. And they've been through the community health system since the age of 4. But that's not good enough all of a sudden because someone's questioned, your child doesn't have autism. The parents are now find themselves having to explain it and justify why that diagnosis is there. So again, education is important.
They doubt whether they have autism because of their...
because the teacher rating doesn't align with the parent rating. But they're seeing two different kids. And we just spoke about masking.
Yeah.
So it is really about understanding that being on the spectrum is a spectrum. And you're not going to have one person like the other on that spectrum.
Yeah.
Each person's quite individual.
Wouldn't they potentially mask when you're assessing them as well?
When they're assessed, we do a whole battery of tests. So they do mask, but then remember I said to you earlier, we do a clinical history and we collect all the data from, say, when they were born right through to the time they're in our office.
Catch them out.
We catch them out. And not just that, we talk about qualitative measures. So when we're doing these assessments from the parent, school, and our observations and our data collection in the observation schedules that we do, is that we're looking at the whole picture. And so that's why it's really important. It's really important to be able to say, you know, I've been assessed, I do have this diagnosis for my child, and at what point will I, if we're going to go back to our main question here when we carried on with the conversation, is that when will I do a diagnosis disclosure with my child? Because they deserve to own it, because people will question whether they're on the spectrum or not. And this goes to, I've got adult males that come in now, their child's been diagnosed and they're like, oh my God, I actually think he's exactly like me. This is what I was like. And they've actually gone through the assessment process and they've been diagnosed with autism themselves. Yeah. And they never thought in their wildest dreams. Back then, like we said earlier, our parents never looked into it. But for some reason now there's so much education about it. It's so much information about, you know, what it is and how people live with it and what the supports are out there, that people screen for it a lot more easily now too. That when you've got a diagnosis for your child, you think, I think this was me. I actually think this was me. And I can't go to work some days because they've changed my shift and I need to go on that shift, because for me, if I'm not on that shift, I don't know what's expected. And if I don't know what's expected, I can't function, which is part of autism.
Yeah.
So he was pulled up on why he's got so many frequent, you know, sickies, but he just couldn't cope when his shift was changed from aisle 8 to 9.
Yeah.
Because he's usually doing aisle 9, you know, or aisle 8. So it's really hard, because if you're not diagnosed earlier on, even as an adult, you'll find challenges. Not being able to keep a job, not being able to sustain a relationship, why there might be extra added pressure in your relationship with your partner, why you're not connecting with your children. And sometimes it could just be that you've had something like autism as a child and it's never been picked up. You know, we get people coming with a diagnosis of schizophrenia sometimes, Francis. And, you know, sometimes I question when I go back through that clinical history and I think, could it have been just autism? But they've come in with schizophrenia. Why? Wow. Because, you know, we talked about communication, Francis, and people say, the people on the spectrum might express themselves in saying, I hear funny voices in my head telling me that I'm not good enough. That's their ability to communicate. What they're saying is, I'm always telling myself I'm not good enough. And this is where you really need to decide, is this hallucinations, paranoid ideations, or is it something that maybe they didn't have earlier on? And that's why that clinical history and collecting the background history about their childhood is really, really important, because you find there's something there that kind of draws that conclusion at the end. I mean, that's, again, we're talking about a handful of presentations. Schizophrenia is real too. And there is schizophrenic diagnosis out there, and they have severe, significant needs themselves. But we're just talking about sometimes if it's not picked up in early childhood, you might get misdiagnosed as an adult. So early signs,
and
early
who knows
detection.
how often that happens? Yeah.
We don't know. You know, early signs, early intervention. Really, for me, it just eliminates and alleviates a lot of the possibility of regression.
And you mentioned it can impact their relationships. How might autism impact someone's relationship, especially if they're unaware or didn't know that they had it?
Again, if you are the male in the house and the wife is looking after your 2 children with autism and you can barely get yourself to work because your shift has changed, imagine the immense pressure there.
Yeah.
We need to pay the rent. There's utility bills. There's therapist support bills that we need to pay for our therapists, our child's appointments, you know, and you're expected to pick up the pieces. Your wife just does not understand why you can't get yourself to work. Why is it you're having fights with people at work because they didn't do things the way you think they should be done?
Yeah.
Because that's not how it should be done.
You could just imagine the strain with his wife.
And the conflict at work with colleagues. You know, you've got no right to tell someone why they put the boxes in that place, not in that place.
Yeah.
You know, that's your superiors to do that. But in that person's head, it was like, well, no, that's wrong. It's not how it should be done. So conflict in the workplace, conflict at home with your wife, it's very difficult if you don't understand. And this is why I say own it. You need to understand why it is you might be struggling with these things. Otherwise, people just judge you as being unresponsible, not picking up the slack as a husband, not being a great father, not being able to organise things for the household, not wanting to go on long drives and create memories.
Probably even looks almost emotionless, like he doesn't care.
Yeah.
He doesn't
the
love,
wife could be sick and he just would not understand why she's carrying on. It's just very flat.
Yeah.
No empathy, no affection. And not all people on the spectrum don't exhibit or display empathy or affection, but we're talking about the ones that don't understand it.
Yeah.
And it's been
how
just
it may
struggling.
come across.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so the wife is like, well, I don't have the emotional need that I need from my husband or the emotional supports because he's just not present with me. You know, there's a lot of sensory factors to consider as well. You know, intimacy is a big factor there as well. You get some partners that say, you know, intimacy is a big factor for my husband because now, you know, he's got sensory aversions. He doesn't like the whole experience, but she doesn't understand that this person's questioning his autism now and it's something that he's struggling with.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors that should be considered. And if it's not considered earlier on, it certainly does not go away as an adult. Like I said, there's no cure for autism or...
It's not something you grow out of.
You learn to live with it. And early detection, intervention leads to better stability and consistency in your lifespan. That's it.
Yeah. Is it inherited or like some dormant gene or something?
It is genetic. So you do find that we ask, is there anyone in the family? And it doesn't mean just because it hasn't been before, it doesn't start somewhere. But it is a genetic, and we do find there's a strong correlation that if it's in one family member, that we do have other family members with it as well.
Yeah, right.
Such as ADHD as well.
You know what I think has also been good is sort of normalizing that these things exist and people struggle with these things. Have you seen the show The Big Bang Theory?
Yep.
Yeah. I think that did a pretty good job at almost normalizing, like, there are people out there like this. And so if you've seen it, everyone knows Sheldon is he's surely he's autistic.
Yes,
I mean,
there's no doubt.
I'm not a psychologist, but even I can see that, right?
That's right.
You know, in pretty much the last episode of the whole show, he's having a go how all his friends are selfish, and his wife says, well, Sheldon, you broke their hearts the way you've treated them. And he says, but I didn't mean to.
Yeah. But
and
he didn't see
very
these
frustrated,
actions.
she said, but you never mean to. And that's the only reason why we essentially tolerate you.
Well, it's a coping mechanism for them, right? That's the way they know how to cope.
Yeah.
We just spoke about a young man that finds it hard to get to work if his shift's changed from aisle to aisle. They find it hard to cope. And I'm sure you've watched The Good Doctor. I always make reference to this with my parents, and I say, look, here's a doctor, you know, and I just say it's a great depiction of what life is like on the spectrum. Yeah. You know?
And once you learn how to deal with it, it's almost normal in that everything functions. Same like, you know, Sheldon, or same with, what's his name in The Doctor?
I'm not sure
The
his
Good
exact
Doctor.
name, but
great actor, by the way.
Like, he is absolutely amazing. But I love the way they actually depict it.
Yeah.
I love the way they depict it. And it's so on point because this is exactly what they struggle with. No filter, saying things. They don't mean to say it in a crude or rude way, but it's just the way they communicate it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you giggle it out. And some people think, oh, but they speak so well. Yeah, but it doesn't mean they know how to communicate.
Yeah.
Communication is a big factor with autistic people, and there's a deficit in that.
Yeah, being able to ingest social cues.
Absolutely.
Which then, you know, sort of dictate how you respond and whatnot.
And so people say, well, what do you do with early intervention? And it is about working with children to identify social cues, read emotions, connect the facial expressions with the tone of voice and the body language. And we go through scenarios and we say, you know, look at this picture and explain to me what you think might be happening. And how do you think this character that we'll be using in the session, and how do you think that person should react? And what do you think it's trying to tell us? So, and then we go through matching body language with the voice tone and, you know, the thought process. We use our thoughts, we use our eyes and our ears and our feelings to actually connect when we're communicating with people, because we need to do those things in order to get a better communication. And they're not going to perfect it, but at least it reduces and they become a little bit more conscious about their interaction with people. Yeah. Some people don't like to, and people say, oh, she's too friendly. There's no way she's autistic. Well, no, because it's a spectrum.
Yeah. And
they're either too friendly that they don't know appropriate versus inappropriate and they're too in your space, or they're too reserved, withdrawn, and don't want anything to do with other people.
Yeah.
And so you need to pick that up as well. That not just because they're over friendly or they make fantastic eye contact. What's eye contact got to do with being on the spectrum?
Yeah.
You can make over eye contact is inappropriate as well. People generally look and they look away, and that's fine. But just because they're not looking, they're autistic, it doesn't work that way.
They could just keep staring at you.
That's right. Overstaring, you're like, there's something on my face.
Yeah.
They do that.
Yeah.
And that's why we call it the spectrum. As we said earlier, not any one person.
Because it presents so differently.
So differently. It's a spectrum.
Yeah. So it has been, I think the normalization has been good.
No, it's
like
helped
normalizing that it exists and you just learn to deal with it.
We can't avoid it.
Yeah.
It's there. And there's a lot of people coming through every single day. It's funny because sometimes we'll question, like, it's so common, but this is what we do. We work. It's like saying, why does an oncologist see so much cancer throughout the day? He's an oncologist. He's getting those referrals. And we're the same. We're like, there's so much autism coming through these days. But that's what we do. And this is why the referrals come through, is because we work specifically with these kind of conditions. So more education out there, absolutely. There's bigger screeners. There's more information about how to detect it. And that's made it a lot easier for people to get it early as well. Yeah.
Something said really well on that show is when he finally wins the Nobel Prize and he makes his speech and he ditches his self-centered speech and he thanks his friends. Right at the end, he says, I want you to know that in my own way, I love you all.
Yeah.
And I think I've spoken to some parents with children with various sort of behavioral issues, and they always know how that their kid shows love or shows they're upset. And,
that's right.
Oh, this is what they'll do when X, Y, Z. And I think it would help a lot if people around as well actually sought to understand that.
Absolutely.
So like I've spoken with a parent before, and so I just flat out asked him, I was like, look, how do I know if your daughter is comfortable, uncomfortable, happy, sad? Like what are the sort of cues? Because obviously she's going to behave differently.
Absolutely.
How would you recommend people approach parents or families that have a child that, not just autism, but any issue? Because I'm sure parents hear a lot of things which can be quite disheartening from other people. What are the sort of do's and don'ts of how to
let me
deal
tell you,
with
Francis,
those parents?
It's really hard for the parents because sometimes they actually avoid even going to the supermarket. Some of them have never gone to the supermarket with their husband and children. One parent would always stay back with another child. Some of them, it's that severe for them that they avoid others having the privilege of seeing their child and the way they exhibit the behaviours. And I say privilege because people need to really understand that if a child is having a tantrum at the shopping centre, it's not a reflection on the parenting.
Yeah.
It absolutely is not.
Which is where people jump to, like, oh, what a bad parent.
It's
almost.
got nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
I think more understanding that maybe there's an underlying reason. We don't have to read it. We don't have to have it written on our forehead. We just need to make the judgment that, well, they're having a bad day.
Yeah.
And they're trying to communicate something. Maybe just leave the parents deal with it.
Yeah.
And there are people that judge.
Yeah.
People who don't like kids that touch everything. Well, we try not to get them to touch everything.
But sometimes they do.
Yeah, sometimes they do. We don't want kids running around in a restaurant. Parents don't want them running around in a restaurant either. I bet they'd love to sit and have a quiet dinner without having to tell the child, stop touching this.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen for them. But imagine that immense pressure it causes the family when they're feeling judged or feeling like they're being looked at because their child is running around that restaurant.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It's hard
work.
enough as it is,
hard.
let alone people giving you the side eye because you didn't raise your kid properly.
I think it's also very important that we understand that parents don't need to put themselves in a little bubble and say, I've got a child with special needs. And we're not just talking about autism here. We're talking about ADHD, intellectual disability, autism, and a range of other ones. But we don't need to be in a bubble and say, I'm not going to go out because of.
Yeah, of course. They should be able to participate in the world.
We're depriving them from the opportunity of learning as well. If you don't take them to that shopping centre and teach them how to regulate when they don't get what they want, how would they ever learn when next time they're in that shopping centre? So it's about exposure and experience as well and guiding them through that process of how do we work through this? We spoke earlier about accomplishment, giving them that sense of accomplishment.
Yeah.
And everyone likes to feel like they've accomplished something.
Yeah.
So to put them in a bubble, and I'm not saying parents generally deliberately do that, they just also want to spare themselves and others,
Well, it's exhausting,
it's exhausting.
It's hard enough to do it at home. Now you're in a foreign place. You don't know how they might act.
That's right.
There's people around.
Yeah.
You might have multiple children.
Absolutely. So I think community understanding is really important. Having the community understand or society understand that it's not a person not being a good parent.
Yeah.
It's the parent who's trying to teach the child what's appropriate versus not appropriate.
Yeah.
How to behave and not behave.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what's really important.
So not judging is one thing and obviously important. What else can you say something sort of reassuring or
to the parents?
Yeah.
Go out
Yeah.
and take them, and don't worry that if your child has a meltdown that you're going to be judged, because as exactly what you said earlier, we're depriving them from the opportunity to learn how to regulate.
Yeah.
We're not teaching them that this is what life is out there by just keeping them at home, because we don't want them to have a meltdown because they don't like shopping centres.
Yeah.
You know, choose when you go shopping centres. So if you know after school hours is a rush, I wouldn't go after school when you know your child doesn't like the big,
the crowds. And the noise. Yeah.
So go at a time where you can take them maybe after hours, but have them exposed to those experiences, because they will learn how you paid, how you look for cheaper prices and, or sales, what you put in your basket, how you put them in the bags, how you sorted your shopping. All of this is life experiences. And having that exposure is really important. You want to order a sandwich. You might get them to watch how they're making the sandwich. We're talking about sequencing here now.
Yeah.
Look at how they make the sandwich. They put the butter on the bread. They put the cheese. They put the lettuce. So it is about having the opportunity and exposure to be able to develop knowledge and learn. And just because we have a disability, it doesn't mean we don't learn. Learning happens at their own pace. And that's what we need to remember. And if they're not behaving well today, they will behave next time. And I think that's what's really important.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I was taken to the shops with my mum, and I had a massive tantrum. And her solution was, when we got back home, I copped a belt.
Who hasn't when we're our age?
Yeah.
Who hasn't?
I copped a belting, and apparently the next time we went shopping, I was pretty much skipping to the shops. So maybe it worked that time, but maybe it's not going to work for other kids.
Absolutely not. Not all kids work well with smacking.
Yeah. And I might just say I have an amazing mother.
Yeah. We all have amazing parents.
I just realised it sounded like I dissed my mum.
No, not at all.
On YouTube.
I think we've all been smacked. I remember the first smack I ever got was because I had an argument with my sister, but I never really identified. And my parents are tops. I would not be here today, I would say, without my parents. And if I had to choose ever, over and over and over again, who my parents would be, it'd be definitely the same parents I've got today.
Yeah, I like how we have to preface that our parents are good
just
parents.
so that we don't get misunderstood here, right?
Yeah.
But we used to get a smack because they wanted to teach us not to fight with our siblings.
Yeah.
We have to love each other.
Tell me about
so they'd say, come here and open your hands. And we're like, got a smack each. It's like, I just learned that I don't want to smack, but I did not learn that I don't want to fight with my sister.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we know, look, questions get asked about, whether it's going to be strict parenting or is it going to be gentle parenting?
Yeah, which was one of the questions. We were going to do questions at the end, but let's talk about it. What's
balance?
Yeah.
Life is about balance. I mean, can you stand on one leg for a very long time? There's only a significant amount of time that you can stand on one leg.
Yeah.
Balance. Life is about balance. You want to get on a seesaw. You need to have fun, but you need someone else on that seesaw, assuming that they're the right size. But we want balance. We want to have fun. We want to be able to play there. So it's give and take. And parents need to do their job. And to do their job, I think they need to use both.
So where's the line sort of with strict parenting? Because obviously we've all seen cases where parents were so strict their kids became ultimate rebels and went the complete opposite way as soon as they had the chance to.
And the vice versa is true as well.
And the vice versa is true, where you have the super gentle parenting.
Gentle parents, and their child has just for some reason gone the other way altogether. So we don't really know whether it's going to work this way or that way. It's about reading and knowing your child.
Yeah.
You've got children in the same household who are totally different. So it's about understanding the individual child and what works for them. If you know your child, you've given them something to do and you're finding yourself constantly repeating it and then escalating till you start yelling and screaming, then implementing punishment, well, then you automatically know and read your child that he needs things broken down. So let's break down things for him. Give him one thing, get him to do it, then give him the next thing. Because then what we're doing is we're preventing that escalation, hence preventing the strict parenting.
Yeah.
Strict parenting never hurt anyone. We all need boundaries.
Yeah.
It's a bit like, well, why we have boundaries when we go to work. Your boss is not going to let you go run amok when you want. You have strict bosses that say, no, this is what I want done, and you do it. And the boss who's a bit more lenient has workers who don't perform as well, for example. So having balance is really important. It's very important. And I'm not going to get into smacking too much. I think you said there's some questions at the end. Maybe this will tap into it. But smacking with strict parenting, but having a gentle, nurturing nature as well, a forgiving and loving, harmonious nature with your child. Balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. You smack your child because you've told them 1, 2, 3 times not to touch that fireplace, and they continue to touch the fireplace. So then you give them a bit of a smack or dust off the bottom there. It's not going to kill them.
Yeah.
But you've done everything you can before that to educate them about why they shouldn't be doing that thing in the first place.
Yeah.
You smack them gently, then you turn around and say, why do you think I just got so angry with you? Have that conversation, communicate with them and connect with them, because you're not now just the strict parent that smacked and the child now learned, I'm not going to do that because I want to avoid a smack.
Yeah.
It's because they learnt from that communication with you.
Yeah. And just the terminology there, like you're saying smack them gently, dust off their bottom. Like you got a young child, you're not bashing your child. You're not trying to bruise them.
No, absolutely not.
It's just something that's just enough that they feel it.
Yep,
you know?
that's right.
Yeah.
And I explain this to parents as I go through my, mandatory reporting disclosure with them. And I say, look, people hear this and they get turned off straight away. Oh my gosh, she's going to report me if my son ever said they smacked me. But we also make logical sense and join the dots together. This child attends every appointment. They're well groomed. They're well fed.
Yeah.
They're nurtured. They don't miss an appointment.
Yeah.
But then one day they come and say, my mummy smacked me on my bottom.
Yeah.
Well, you're still here, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly,
we all got smacked.
Yeah.
It's not about, oh my gosh, she smacked him, I'm going to go and report. It's about making the judgment, and people's lives have been torn upside down just because of a report that was probably sometimes ungrounded. And there are some that need to be, just so we don't dismiss that. There are people that go overboard with the punishment, and we do not condone or accept that because, like you said, they are little children, and it's not about punishing on that level. You want to punish, but you want to educate. And if you can avoid the smacking altogether, that's what should be done.
Yeah.
We're not talking about just smacking just for smacking because you just touched it. There you are.
Yeah.
Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Okay, you just touch it. Smack on the hand. I said don't touch it.
Yeah.
But you've already led up to and worked it up to that point.
Which is what I was going to ask is, do boys typically need to be smacked more than girls? Because my experience growing up, us boys it was almost like it was every second day when we were quite mischievous. And it was like my sister just needed a stern looking at. Yeah. And she usually sort of fell into line.
It goes back to
what I said. And even now with
earlier.
Nieces, it's just like they don't really need to be.
Put a doll in front of a girl, she'll sit and play with the doll, or she'll play with the, her dress ups, or her makeup or her nail kit. Not jumping around, not hurting anyone, not being rough and aggressive with her siblings.
Yeah.
Not just smacking something off the table because it felt like it was fun. Boys do that. So it goes back to reading the child, because you've got some children that don't either. You've got some boys that are just quite passive, just settle, just do what they want to do.
But I just sort of mean, like in general, I feel like boys are more likely to push the boundaries.
I would say so.
Like we used to test our mum a lot, and I think that's a common thing, at least sort of in the Middle Eastern world, where it's like, mum,
I would say so.
What's mum going to do? She still managed to I
would say so.
I was going to make a joke and say do some damage. She never damaged us, but
she'd love to hear this.
Yeah. She still managed to keep us in line, but it's like I felt like we pushed it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Whereas my sister or the girls in the family were more, no, they said don't do that. They said don't do that.
Yeah.
So,
and girls generally like to please their parents a lot more. They're little girls. They just want to help. They want to do things. Generally,
but
not
so
all.
annoying.
Not all.
When you're young, it's annoying because they make you look bad.
No, they do, but it's because you acted in a way that you shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Therefore, you got the smack, right, Francis? You weren't sitting watching TV and you got the smack.
I was innocent most of the time, man. I'll just be minding my own business.
I'm sure. And you just came got a little bit of a smack, right? Dusted off a little bit. But generally, and that's what I say to parents or kids when they come and say, oh, my mummy smacked me. Oh, were you watching TV when she smacked you? No, I hit my sister. Like, well, there you are. So maybe next time let's not hit our sister.
Yeah.
So it's, again, they weren't just sitting doing nothing. And boys are a lot more physically active than girls.
Yeah.
So they get up to more mischief than girls. And not all girls, but some girls will push the boundaries a little bit more as well. And you've got the brothers that are not and have not put the parents through that much headache either.
Yeah.
You get that side of the argument
Yeah, of course.
there.
People are across the
But boys
sort of
generally,
spectrum of it.
boys do. I mean, you worry when they get out in their car for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's less likely that a girl's going to go out and do burnouts in a car.
100%.
But put a teenage boy, 18 years old, on their P's and see what he's going to do with the car.
Yeah.
And it's ludicrous.
Yeah, we got a whole bunch of threats when we got our P's for the first time.
Yeah.
It was, if this ever happens, I will cut up your license. Yeah, it was like, fair enough.
Well,
fair enough.
and they had a right, because generally that's what we see the boys do.
Yeah.
They do more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what it is, but it is. Boys are more actively doing things that they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
And then that reacts to parents to a level
They're
where
just
they have
more
to
likely
smack
to
them.
be. They're more likely to be negligent.
Yeah.
Like, there's a bit more negligence there. And
And
honestly, I would have done burnouts if I wasn't given a Tarago to drive.
Again, strict
You know, my
parenting.
Ps, yeah.
And a Tarago.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
strict parenting, you're always worried about your license being cut
Yeah,
off, never
yeah.
been able to
It
drive.
worked.
But again, was that your parents being very strict, or were they just putting boundaries in
No,
place?
they've definitely kept us out of a lot of trouble
That's it.
for that. Yeah.
And that's what's really important. I mean, for me, today, I avoid going shopping on my own, because I've always known that we go together and we're never independent enough to go on our own. So if I need to go shopping, I'll call a sister, I'll call I'll wait for my husband or my children to join me. I just don't feel comfortable doing it. And it's carried through.
Oh, really? Till now?
well,
Yeah. Just,
you know,
I mean, you've been doing it for so
Our
long.
parents came from Lebanon many years ago.
Yeah.
They left back there when there was the war and there was trauma
Of
and all
course,
that. So
yeah.
they've left this image in their head that they need to protect us. They've come to a foreign country. They don't speak the language, and
Yeah.
they need to make sure they do a good job.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of strict parenting,
Yeah.
gentle strict parenting. And so it included, not being able to go shopping on your own or selecting which university you went to, because you can't drive down to the city on your own. You're not going to do that, which was fine.
Yeah.
And I appreciate them for that today, because this is who we are today, because they protected us. And then it's funny, because when they went and returned back to overseas, they saw that we were so much more sheltered than the people overseas now
that's
today.
right. That's exactly right.
Wow. But again, because it was not their country
Yeah.
and home, that they always felt that they needed to protect us from the unknown.
Yeah. I've always maintained, especially in terms of Lebanon, our parents raised us based off how Lebanon was when they left.
Yes.
Whereas the people in Lebanon are raised based off how they think we live
That's
in the
right.
West.
Absolutely.
That's
right.
and so it's very strange for us to go back, because we're almost like, obviously they're still very Lebanese, but there's this Western streak to how they behave and act, which we don't even have.
No.
So it's quite odd. But I mean, our parents came. You can't blame them. I mean, obviously you don't, but I can't blame them for how strict they were, because it was so unknown
That's right.
and foreign, and we were also looked at very differently.
Absolutely.
Like the original sort of Lebanese immigrants.
Absolutely.
It's taken a long time for us to sort of be more
where we are today.
where we are today. So,
but honestly, I think I mimic a lot of the way I was raised and the way I raise my children today. And this goes back to a lot of the theories around, parenting. If we go back to that topic again for a minute there, Francis, that they look at you and they look at you as a role model, and they take that from you and they then follow through with it themselves. And I know that my parents were my role model, so therefore I'm now following through with the way they raised me. And I almost am mimicking everything they've done with the way I'm doing it with my kids now.
When you were younger, it's sort of a two-part question, did you take issue at times, as kids and teens might, how your parents raised you? Too strict, and you feel...
As a child, you would naturally.
Yeah.
You think it's not fair.
Yeah.
My parents are always too strict. And it's
Okay,
not, I think, until you have your own children that you
Which
realise.
is what I was going to say. So when I was sort of growing up, there were times where I think they're way too strict.
Yeah.
I'll never be like this. I don't even have kids, but now I have nieces and nephews, and I just think, man, when I have kids, I think I'm going to be worse. I'm going to be worse.
You think
Maybe
that.
because we see so much out there and you're so much more concerned, but you do start to feel a lot more empathy for our
Absolutely.
parents.
It's scary.
Yeah.
I mean, if we talk about social media now or, devices, it took me a while to get my daughter a phone. It took a long time, and I always said year 12. But after having some conversations with my husband, we agreed that maybe, well, okay, she's getting now picked up from a certain area where she goes to school, and now we need to have contact with her.
Yeah.
So he's gone ahead and made the decision to get one for her. But our rule at home and our policy at home, and it's not to be broken, is that all devices, iPads, computers and phones are downstairs. They do not go upstairs.
Yeah, awesome.
And honestly, Francis, they know that rule. Just like you just said earlier, you knew that if you done burnouts, your license would be likely cut off, and you always had fear, I cannot drive. I'm not going back to not driving. And they know that she knows that if that phone, or the little ones as well, her siblings know that if those devices go upstairs,
they can't go upstairs at all.
Not upstairs. It's
awesome.
no iPad, no phone, no technology devices upstairs.
Yeah.
It's an out of bounds area.
The worst thing that ever happened was kids using devices in their bedroom.
And this is what I'm trying to protect, especially in my line of work.
Yeah.
What you see is just, it's traumatizing. The things you hear and the things that young adolescents get exposed to is terrifying.
Yeah.
You know,
the internet, honestly, I had a mate of mine on the show. He's a doctor a few weeks back, and we spoke about just how bad social media is, especially for adolescent girls.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
a horrible place.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
And not just that, Francis, you think about it, when you went to school, I mean, we all had issues at school with mates or friends, and you'd leave school, you'd go home, and for that 5-8 hours before you slept, you forgot about that problem for a little bit.
You sleep it off and
now it's with
home.
you 24 hours. And just imagine when they're taken in their room. They don't even sleep at night because they're waiting for that message to see what that next response is going to be.
Yeah.
It is terrifying, the pressure and the what the kids are exposed to by just having that device in their hand.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to give it to them, have boundaries in place.
Yeah.
Because
it's a very reasonable boundary. Like you have a phone, you have devices, but why do you need to be in your room in the dark with the door closed, scrolling at midnight?
I've told my daughter,
as an
you
adolescent
choose now.
girl.
Because now the question was, can I have Snapchat? Can I have Instagram? I'm like, well, choose it. Do you want a phone? Yes. I go, then no Snapchat and no social media.
Yeah.
No Instagram, no Facebook. That was a choice. The phone was there to make contact with you. You've got contact with the friends in the time that we've given you.
Yeah.
You respect that.
No, that's awesome.
Again, it's to protect them from what's out there. And it's not because I'm being an unreasonable parent, and it's not what I'm asking parents to do. I'm just telling parents to put boundaries around technology and devices, because a lot of the problems we're seeing today is generally because of what they've been exposed to on social media.
Yeah.
Discord, Snapchat. You don't know who your child is talking to on Snapchat. Even Minecraft and Roblox, you've got your child online, you don't know who pops up on the other end.
You don't know.
So just if you're going to give it to them, be there, be present, be involved, see what they're doing on that screen. It's very important.
Yeah. It's interesting because if you were to tell a parent from the moment their child is born, whatever your child wants, give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
Most parents would unanimously sort of agree, no, that's a horrible idea.
Yeah.
Like my kid might want ice cream, but he needs to eat his dinner first.
Yes.
But it's almost like the age at which that stops has gone down significantly. And now people, when their kid is like 10 or 11, it's like, oh, that's what he wants. It's like, your kid's 10.
You're the parent.
Like, your kid might be 15. Like a 16-year-old boy is not as mature as you might think at times,
right.
you know?
That's right.
Especially when like kids start, you know, the boy goes, like they're going through puberty, they're changing, their hormones are changing. They're not always going to know exactly what's right for them, especially if they're an impulsive child. Yeah. You know, you can't react to your kid's impulses.
Well, for me, it's again, understanding the child. You can have a child who is 16 and totally immature and unreasonable in their thinking and making impulsive decisions, and you handle them that phone. Or you can have someone who is 10 but really mature and give them a phone and you have no issues with them at all.
Yeah.
But again, it's about still, even if they're mature,
have the boundaries.
Have the boundaries in place.
If they're mature, they won't have an issue with the boundaries.
Boundaries keep us grounded. Boundaries keep us in perspective.
Yeah.
It's really important.
So when you were talking about a balance between strict and gentle parenting, like you do realize what you've just described. Mind you, I think it's awesome. Like I would probably want to emulate that exactly. But a lot of people would view that as extremely strict.
Really? Well, it's
parenting.
And it probably does come across that way.
Yeah.
But as I said, it's about boundaries. And in life we have boundaries.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to a restaurant and if they've noticed you've become a little bit more intoxicated than you should, they will find you a way out of that restaurant.
I mean, even same in most clubs.
You go to a club,
so you had too much, you can leave. Yeah.
We're going to have to ask you to leave. You've had a bit too much to drink.
Yeah.
again, we're talking about boundaries,
Yeah.
and when you're teaching your child boundaries at home, they're not going to be confronted in the big world out there when they go out there and there are boundaries.
Yeah.
We're keeping them grounded.
Yeah, 100%.
This is reality, and parents, you might call it strict parenting, but I call it teaching your child that life out there is not about just getting what you want.
Yeah, I think it's great parenting.
It's not about just giving them what they want.
Yeah.
We can give them anything. And this is another, marital breakup and pressure these days. I would really put it down to what the parenting style was like for that child. If a child was at home and I can give my child absolutely anything she wants and buy her anything, the most extravagant things that she wants, just because she asks for it, then she meets someone that cannot provide her and give her that.
And keep up,
and keep up with her demands, then what have I set her up for? As a parent, what have I set her up for?
Yeah.
If I've made her live at home, she knows we can financially do it, for example, or any parent can financially do it. But I've said no. And I've put boundaries in place about what's acceptable spending and what's not.
Yeah.
Again, then we're going to talk about, are they being stingy or not stingy? But it's not about that. It's about teaching them there's boundaries and budgets so that when they do meet their partner for life, they're able to work with that.
Yeah.
And if she's lucky enough to meet someone who wants to buy her an expensive lavish handbag every week, then good luck for her.
Yeah.
But at least she's learnt the other way around, not the hard way around.
Yeah. I remember I used to ask, my dad for stuff. And when he'd say no, my order, especially when I was a kid, like, Dad, I'll save up and buy it. And he said, no, it's not about the money.
It's not about that.
We can buy it. We just bought this for this much and this for this much. But there are certain things you don't need and there are certain things we don't believe are good for you.
That's right.
So it's not about the money.
It's not just being able to access it whenever you want.
Yeah.
It's about knowing that, it's there, but you don't have to buy it when you just want it.
Yeah. And it's a good point about the marital problems. Like, they've obviously developed certain tendencies, whether it be man or woman,
absolutely, because
of how they were raised. And when you're used to getting everything you want, it's very hard to suddenly stop
absolutely
getting everything you want.
Absolutely. If, for example, I'll ask parents, if you've been in a job and you've had this stable financial income coming in consistently, and then one day you get made redundant, how hard is it to transition from having money to no money? It's a big blow.
Yeah, huge.
And you don't cope yourself. So if we're going to subject our children to having everything they want all their life and then getting into a relationship where the time's going tough and we can't just do the things you're used to doing, this is very confronting.
Yeah.
And then the depression, I'm not happy, life isn't good enough and I deserve better. And this could be for the opposite sex. I'm not just generalising girls. I say girls because I come from a family of 8 girls and I've got 3 girls myself, so I tend to speak about girls more. But it's just generally, be it the opposite sex or not, it's making sure that there are boundaries. Life is about boundaries. Can I drink 10 bottles of water or can I just drink the one?
Yeah.
I could probably push myself to drink the 5 or 10, but no, let me just stick to the one. That's enough for me today.
Yeah.
Boundaries. It never hurt anyone.
It's a great concept I heard. You have to sacrifice short-term compassion for long-term compassion. It's like, if I let her play with her phone upstairs tonight at midnight, she might be happy for 20 minutes. But these sorts of habits in the long term, 5 years, 10 years down the track, what sort of character do I want her to have him to grow in? And their life will be much easier because of the things you're implementing now.
Absolutely. It's just eliminating.
Like, I experienced that myself. Growing up, our parents always made sure we had certain responsibilities, certain chores. As soon as we could push a lawnmower, we're mowing the lawn. As soon as we can do X, Y, Z, we're doing it.
Because that's reality.
And at the time, I hated it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I'm in the middle of playing Call of Duty. Now I've got to do this.
Yeah.
But now when I have to drop what I'm doing, which I'm enjoying, to do something which is a responsibility, it doesn't feel
hard
as a disruption. It's like, no, this needs to be done.
And we'll just do it. And we'll get on with it.
Yeah, my parents go overseas for months at a time now. And it's just me and some of my siblings at home, and we just run the house as if our parents were there because we've been taught to be responsible.
How important is planning and organising?
Yeah.
Problem solving.
Yeah.
We do this as parents. We need to be doing this every single day for them to teach them this is how they're going to lead a prosperous adulthood life.
Yeah.
One that is all-rounded. You got a problem? How do we be resilient enough to solve the problem?
Yeah.
We're not able to purchase this car today, but I really want it. Well, that we're going to have to work for that.
Yeah.
Let's work for that. It's not something that's not impossible, but we're just saying it's not going to happen now just because you requested it.
Yeah.
Let's work for that.
We're just in the Netflix era where everything's on demand. Like, back in the day, we'd wait for Sunday night, 8:30 for the next episode of something, and now they drop a whole season in one hit and you binge it till 4 a.m.
That's right.
And it's such a horrible mindset to act on your impulses. Look, honestly, that's something I always struggled with. I was never a very moderate person, sort of like all in or all out. And so I would always struggle with moderating consumption of things.
I'm all about balance and boundaries. I can't stress that enough. As a parent, you should really be modelling that boundary as well.
Yeah.
And it just helps your child because they look out for everything that you do. You know, how can you tell a child, don't smack, but you're smacking them?
Yeah.
You just smacking their brother, but then you're smacking them. It's quite ironic, right?
Yeah.
But teach them and teach them that this is a red line you don't cross.
Yeah.
Again, we talk about boundaries.
Yeah.
We don't want you to cross that. You're going out, okay, I want you home by this certain time. It's not because you're a strict parent. You're still letting them out. But put boundaries, because if you don't put boundaries, you can't complain if they don't come home the next morning. Everything's about consistency and boundaries. You just spoke about, for example, a young girl maybe taking up her phone upstairs and playing on a phone upstairs in a room, and then next time you tell her, no, that's not acceptable. You're not allowed any phones upstairs. No, put the boundaries in place. And even if it is that you want her to play with her phone, it's definitely not upstairs because that rule is not upstairs.
Yeah.
She understands that you're not deviating off that. Yeah. And that rule means something for you. Yeah. Therefore, it's going to mean something for her.
Which brings up sort of my next question was the importance of sticking to what you've agreed. So if you've decided something is a reasonable boundary, don't veer off it.
Absolutely not. Yeah. Just you know what you're doing it for. You know your child and make sure you consistently follow through with it. If there's question marks around from your child why you've decided to put that boundary in place, have a conversation with them. Explain it to them. Educate them about why. They do understand. Don't just say because. Well, yeah, I know because. Say why. Let them see where you're coming from. Because what that's also doing is it's creating a communication line between the both of you, better understanding, and it's also equipping them with knowledge about why boundaries are in place as well. Why it's good for them.
Yeah.
Because is not an answer.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, go into it.
They deserve to know why.
Tell them.
Yeah.
That's fine. They're asking. Yeah. Tell them why. They're not going to question when you tell them why. You just say, this is what I've decided because A, B, C, D. But I respect and validate. I respect that you feel that you don't agree with my rules or what I put in place. But these are the rules. And I always tell parents, stick to two options. Like I said earlier about the phone, social media or phone. I want the phone. Okay, I think that's it. Don't bring up social media again.
So if they take social media without the phone, they just do it on like their computer or something?
No, not allowed social media. She's not allowed social media. That's it. I
get that. So if you say social media or phone, if they choose social media, how does that work?
She's not going to choose it. She wants her phone. I always tell them, give an option against something you know they're going to reject.
Oh,
she so desperately wanted the phone.
Yeah.
So sorry, I should have clarified.
Yeah.
Example, some parents will say, oh, this kid won't have rice. Okay, they won't have rice. Give them rice that's dry rice or rice with some sauce that you know they won't have.
Yeah.
Guess what they're going to eat?
Yeah.
You want them to eat the dry rice, so they'll eat the dry rice because you just offered it against something they're going to reject.
Yeah.
And so in any case, if it's an option you're going to offer them, offer it against something you know they'll probably think, I don't want that. Well, then okay, then go with what I've asked you. Yeah. That's it.
Are you like a salesman in a former life? Like now we're talking about how to close a deal. Like,
It's just, you can get into these debates with them and they will go on for hours with you. Be consistent and be determined in your decision and explain it to them. Because we talk about gentleness, but we also talk about putting boundaries in place, which touches on the strictness, but with nurturing and welcoming nature, which is really important.
So it's like if you stay in the boundaries, things are going to be great. Yeah. You're going to see a lot of love there.
Yeah.
As soon as you veer off that, it might hurt a little bit.
It will.
Yeah.
It will. But short-term pain, long-term gain.
Yeah.
They're going to argue with you for an hour, but do not give in.
Yeah.
That's what they argue with you for. They know they're going to get what they want.
Yeah.
That's why they're arguing. Because somewhere along the line, they've seen that it worked once.
Yeah.
I can get what I want. I'll go for it again. And you know, it's just about, again, consistency. If they see that you're consistent, they're going to give up eventually. No, that's it. These are the rules.
You know, my brother, I was telling you, he has 4 girls, and him and his wife do this really well because sometimes they come over with the girls.
Yep.
We haven't been with them for a couple of days or a few days. We don't know what's been going on, you know, and the girls are smart. I mean, all kids, they're smart, but these girls, very smart. And they'll come up to their uncle and they know that their uncle just wants to sort of, and they needed to have dinner. So they all got made a nice chicken wrap.
Yep.
And it was, once you eat your dinner, you can have a biscuit.
Yeah.
The first one, smashed the sandwich. I finished my sandwich. She's showing everyone, boasting. Good job.
Yeah.
Here's your biscuit. The next one ate like 3/4 of it. And she's like, I'm done. I just want a biscuit. It's like, all right, you ate most of your sandwich. The last one was just the youngest, my goddaughter.
Yep.
She's like,
God bless.
puts the sandwich down.
Yep.
I want a biscuit. You're not having the biscuit.
Yep.
This went on for 2 hours. And she actually went to each of us individually sitting around. And we've all sort of got this rule in our family. When the kids ask us for something, we always defer to their parents.
Which is fantastic.
Because it creates, like you literally sow division in a family,
and it's
by,
so important.
by undermining the parents. So I always say, go ask your dad, go ask your mum. Or I'll ask them, did you ask dad? And they will always, especially when they're very young, yeah, I did. He said yes. Yeah. It's like I look at my brother
really important.
and he shakes his head. I'm like, I don't think you did. And we were going back and forth with her all night.
Yeah.
She threw tantrums. She was screaming. She would try and sneak a slice of cucumber, a biscuit, a peanut. And at one point, I think it may have been me or one of us, I was just like, George, just give her a biscuit. He goes, no, every time it's dinner time this whole week, she has tried to get out of it and she chucks a tantrum to get what she wants.
Yes.
Like he knows what she's trying to do.
He knows the behaviour.
He's like, if we keep giving in, she'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
It's like, fair enough. I don't know what's been going on.
He knows his child.
He knows his child.
He knows his child.
And, she copped a bit of a yelling and then she comes to me and I just whisper, I said, do you want me to get the chicken sandwich and I'll feed you? And ever so subtle. Yeah. She's like,
See, and then
she's two. She's two.
And she knew how to push and how much she could push. But you know what? I bet you gave her what she wanted at the end.
Oh, once she smashed that chicken sandwich, she had her biscuit.
And that's it.
And all was good in the world.
And we're all happy. Fantastic.
And we all joked like, Bernadette, you went through all of this.
Yep. But she had to experience that to learn.
Exactly.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
And don't look at that. Again, we spoke about short-term pain, long-term gain. Go through that hour. Yeah. Because tomorrow she'll know not to do it.
Exactly right.
And let's just push through with it.
Like put in the hours in this first 5 years of their life and it will just start cruising.
It'll just become natural. It'll just become okay.
Yeah.
We have kids that are put on the devices all day because, mothers want to just sit and do their own thing or dads want to do their own thing. And it's like, well, yeah, but then what are you teaching them later when they've got to do their HSC exams or they've got to start planning and putting that extra time in studying? I know they're just in primary school, but it's a behaviour that they've been consistently following through with in younger ages. It's hard to break later.
Yeah.
So again, it's not because they're not able. It's there, they can. But boundaries, give it to them, put boundaries around it and move on. Yeah. Because it makes your life easier so that when they do have to study, you haven't just taken away what they love most. Yeah. Because now all of a sudden you're expecting them to do something that they've never had to do. Yeah. It just makes it easier.
The abrupt changes are very hard. Yeah.
Keep your rules in place. There's a reason why we wake up in the morning, brush our teeth, get dressed, brush your teeth. I don't know how anyone does it, but, get up, brush your teeth, get dressed, have your breakfast, go to work. This is a schedule we follow. And we follow schedules every day. So if you stick to rules and the consistency in the rules, it's just going to become habit, just like your schedule is in the morning. Yeah. That easy.
Yeah, what you're describing, I've seen with my other brother, he's got 2 kids and they're a bit older, sort of like 9, 10, I don't know, ages, somewhere around there. Yeah. And when they were younger, he was also quite on the ball with making sure he sticks to his word. Yeah. Both of their parents were like that. And so now they're just such good kids. Yeah. You don't feel like you're always wrestling with them. They're just happy.
They're resilient.
They're just resilient. Yeah. If sometimes they thought they were going to the park, but they're not anymore, it's like, oh, that's okay. We'll do something else. Yep. It's because they knew you're not always going to get what you want. And sometimes it rains and sometimes it storms. And
that's okay. Because that's
okay.
Life.
Yeah.
That's life. You're teaching
Makes
resilience.
a big difference.
And people say, my child's bored. What can I do for them? Well, no, it's okay to be bored because being bored causes them to be creative as well. Yeah. Let them be bored. Let them think about what they can do when they don't have that device. Yeah. They don't need it in their hand all the time.
We had this exact conversation at home the last school holidays, my brother. And so his 2 kids, they're like, Dad, we're bored. He said, you can do whatever you want, but no TV and no PlayStation. Yeah. He limits the time very strictly. Yeah. And they said, what do we do? He said, you got to come up with something. I can't solve all your problems for you. And lo and behold, they find something to do and they have a good time and next thing you know, everyone's involved.
That's it. And what you've done is you've caused connection as well. Yeah. And they've learnt something from that engagement with other people. Yeah. And you've just put boundaries in place. Yeah. Now following through with that next time we're going to follow through with the same process. Yeah. It's really important.
And how important is it when it comes to sort of implementing these things, like you've said multiple times, it's all for the sake of your child.
Absolutely.
They can grow, the opportunity to grow, learn, develop, have strong character traits for their future.
Be disciplined.
Be disciplined. What about the importance of mum and dad being on the same page on how to do it? Because
important.
Again, this is all observational.
Yeah.
I'm not married, don't have kids, but any family I've seen where the parents are not on the same page, it is not a secret, and the kids know from what I've seen.
Yeah.
Like they will take advantage of the
From
fact.
one to the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mum said no, I'll speak to dad. Dad said no, I'll speak to mum. Mum will say to the kids, look, I know dad said you can't do this, but before he gets home, you're allowed to do this.
Yep.
What sort of issues does that cause for a family?
We spoke about consistency a lot today.
Mm.
And the minute you've got a parent who's not on board with the other parent, that's not consistent. And that's automatically allowing the child to learn how to be manipulative, take advantage. And we talked about boundaries. And it's not that you don't want to give it to them. It's that, well, if dad said no, maybe we can talk to him together and see what that comes up with. Or if mum says no, well, let's talk to mum and see what we can decide on.
Yeah.
We're not saying don't have a conversation about what you should decide, but don't go against what the other parent said. Don't undermine the other parent. Don't dismiss what the parent had to say.
Yeah.
Validate the child's requests. Tell them that we know how they feel about what they're asking for, but we'll get back to them about what they can and can't do.
Yeah.
Once we've had a conversation about it. There's no point in telling a child no to their request to you if you're the mother, and then know that they're going to undermine you and go to the dad, because vice versa is going to happen to the dad next time.
Yeah.
Then what have you created with this child? So being very consistent is very important, and being on the same page. There's no point in going against and not co-parenting in the right direction. No way. It needs to be. I mean, even parents who are not living in the same household should have a mutual agreement about decisions being made about the child.
Yeah.
Because you want to teach kids not to learn to be manipulative and take advantage of people.
Yeah.
Sure. It's very important.
When I was growing up, if I ever asked my mum or dad for something and they said no, and I went to the other, there'd be times mum might have said no, I go to dad. He's unaware I've spoken to mum. And so he says yes. And one time it was to go to my cousin's house down the road. Half an hour in, I get a call. Francis, it's time to come home. I go, okay. So I come home. He says, did you ask your mum? I was like, yeah. And I got, again,
in trouble.
I coughed it a little bit.
So there you are. That's a cause for getting a smack.
Yeah. And so I was just minding my business watching TV. Next thing you know, I'm getting smacked.
Why is it you knew that you can ask the other parent?
Yeah.
Because you were so determined to getting what you wanted.
Exactly, yeah.
And you didn't care about anyone else.
Yeah, but they always maintain that. They said if the other one makes a call, it's final.
Yeah.
And what would sometimes happen, and we didn't understand why at the time, we do now, is dad might say no, mum might say no to something, and the next day they speak to us and say, hey, we've decided it's a yes.
Yeah.
But what we didn't realize is even if one of them disagreed with the other, we never saw that disagreement.
Yep, which is really important.
In private, they deal with it. Hey, should we let Francis do this or let Peter do this or whatever? And whatever they agree, they come back to us. We have no idea who changed their mind.
Yeah.
We have no idea what the other person thought. They just always decided together and brought it forth together.
Which is really important. It's really important. Have your conversations, have your debates, pros and cons.
Yeah, disagree
fight each other
as much
out
as you want.
Private, bring it back to the table, discuss it with each other and agree on something.
Yeah.
But have the same voice.
Got to be united front.
That's
Otherwise, the kids, they sniff that out.
The kids are smart.
Yeah,
and it's not just one kid, but all kids will know how to get what they want. That's why they're kids. They outsmart you all. But just be on the same page makes parenting a lot easier. Because it's now about, can I get extra screen time? But you don't know what it's going to be like when they're teenagers.
Yeah.
You know? So just making sure that you're on the same page so that even when they are teenagers and then later on in adulthood and they might seek your input about something, they know that mum and dad are on the same page.
Yeah.
And that the decisions are made universally for them two together will make that difference for their child. Not because they don't want to be, accommodating, or they don't want their child to have fun, or they don't want their child to get what they want, but because they want to teach their child that no means no.
Yeah.
And if one parent said no, you don't go ask for another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I always put this down, how do I want to teach my child not to have addictive tendencies in the future, for example. You know,
Yeah.
it's starting that no. Not if I say no here, I'll go find other ways to get it.
Yeah.
It's about grounding themselves to be disciplined as well.
Yeah.
Okay. For example, I went as far as not wanting to give my children dummies because I thought, I mean, I would love to do my research one day on this, but dummies might lead to addictive tendencies in adulthood. And I was like, you know, I don't want dummies. They got to learn that I can give them other ways to self-regulate rather than a dummy.
Yeah.
You know, and I had a lot of input from other people. Don't do this, you shouldn't. That's okay. That's the way I felt. And I actually made it work.
So your kids didn't have dummies?
I don't have dummies.
Yeah.
No. I was worried about addictions and all the, I know, but the background I come from, my work, there was always this fear that I needed just to make sure my
help
kids
them regulate.
knew, by themselves, without having to make it harder for them. It just comes natural. You spoke earlier about it just became normal, and it just becomes normal for them. You know?
You know, my brother with the 4 girls, the first one, she had a dummy for maybe 2 months.
Yeah.
Then they're like, this thing is borderline evil because it has so much power.
Yeah.
So
they got rid of it.
They got rid of it, and all the rest since have never touched a dummy.
Yeah. But it just goes back to when you earlier said that, you know, one parent said yes, one parent said no. So you went back and asked the other parent because the other parent said no. It just, when I referred back to the dummy issue, it was more about knowing that you're teaching your child to have self-control from such a young age. And so when you're gone and ask your parents something and they're singing the same tune, you're automatically going to know that self-control is, I've taken that first answer as no.
Yeah.
That's where it stops for me.
That's where it stops,
Having self-control
and
resilience enough to say, I'm upset about it, but I'm going to respect it, and that's it. I'm just going to live with it because it becomes normal.
Yeah.
It just becomes the norm.
I suppose the next step after the parents being on the same page is in situations where there's a larger family support network, they also need to be on the same page, or at least even if they don't agree, they have to respect the standard set by the parents.
Absolutely.
You know, like in my family, we're quite a tight-knit family, a lot of siblings, a lot of grandchildren now. And so the parents always set the standard and they'll say to us, hey, you know, me and my wife have decided from now on we're not doing this with the kids. So, okay. And it's a no questions asked policy of that's what you want to do, because the kids will start to find gaps with their uncles, with their aunties, with their grandparents. And when they look, when a kid's like sort of looking for a way out and everyone's saying, look at your parents, look at your parents, look at your parents.
They're going to only look at their parents.
They only look at their parents.
And that's why, again, consistency is so important. If you're all on the same page, the child's going to be self-disciplined.
Yeah.
They're not going to go look for loopholes and find devious ways to get what they want.
Yeah.
They're going to accept no, be resilient enough to accept that they don't like it, it's a no, but they're just going to live with it and move on.
Yeah.
Because again, it goes back to not always getting what you want.
Yeah. And the support network needs to understand that they're not doing a kid any favors by undermining, even if they don't feel it's a reasonable request, them sticking to that request is better for the child than them going against it. You know?
The grandparents or uncles or aunts roles can be very vital in, for example, if a child's really upset because the parents said no, you can give them a cuddle and say, you know, well, maybe next time they'll say yes.
Yeah.
That's your role. You can do that role. But you don't have to go give them what they've asked for just because, you know, you want to be the best uncle or the best grandma or granddad or aunt. You need to understand that boundaries and consistency is really important. And if you're all singing the same tune, this child then knows
so much
how
easier
to remain grounded.
Yeah. Yeah, they give us sometimes little tips like, oh, she's been sort of lying a little bit recently or she's been doing this new thing.
She says,
like here's the update on where she's at in her growth. Yeah. And just we sort of all just
she's
keep
a master
an eye.
At this stage.
Yeah.
They
she's been cheating a little bit. Yeah. You mentioned a little before we go to our questions, because there's a bunch of them. We won't get through all of them, obviously, but you mentioned ADHD. I had a couple of quick questions on that. Can you just explain what ADHD is and what causes it? ADHD
is a neurodevelopmental disorder. You're born, your genetic makeup is your brain works that way. It's your inability to executively function and plan and organize. You have trouble with attention, focus. You can't do multiple things at the one time. You start to procrastinate. You're impulsive with your decisions. And you find yourself constantly on the go. Your brain does not slow down. Some people find themselves struggling relationships, struggling at school, struggling with jobs, struggling with financial management, struggling with, budgeting, anything that comes with it is a struggle when it comes to planning, because that planning is just not happening. Your brain's just too fast-paced.
Yeah.
So that is what the ADHD is.
Right. And is it also like genetic?
It is genetic. It is genetic. People ask, is there something that caused the ADHD? Well, you're born with that genetic makeup. Your brain's either just too fast or too slow. Again, it's not that it's not working. It's just working really, really fast. And sometimes people will take a medication to help it slow it down, because it puts them back in line and it gets them to function and it gets them to be more organised. And it's not because the medication is making them become organised because it's an organisation tablet. It's because your brain slows down a little bit more for you to be able to plan better. And that planning is really important in achieving success. But if you're not able to plan, therefore you're impulsive. When you're impulsive, you're making decisions that you're constantly reviewing as well. So, yeah.
What is your view generally on medicating for a lot of these behavioural issues? Is it sort of like an extreme last resort, or generally you're more focused on?
For me, I'd say last resort. I won for treatment in terms of skills you take with you everywhere. It's a bit when I've got someone with anxiety and they say, I'm feeling anxious, and they say, I don't know how to manage this anxiety. I'm going to go get tablets. I'm like, okay. And then a few months later, they've gone to the doctors, they've taken tablets, and they're still not feeling better. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go back and review my medication. Okay, you've gone back and reviewed your medication. This is just an example. They reviewed the medication, and then they're thinking that's still not working, and they're calling you from the doctor's surgery and saying, I'm having a panic attack. I'm like, well, it only works while you're on it, and then stagely goes up and goes up. But what about if we just took our breathing with us everywhere we go? It doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to carry it anywhere. It's with you. No one sees it. And that's a skill we work with parents, with families or people with anxiety. And we tell them, breathe it out. It doesn't, you don't need it,
Yeah.
Smell the flower. Blow the bubble. You got that. It goes anywhere you go. That's a skill. That's one of the many skills, by the way. But just to give you an example, that I'm one for learning skills that they can take everywhere they go and try in different ways, and it'll help them, rather than just taking medication and continuously having to increase that medication.
Yeah.
So there are...
Because they build like a tolerance sort of thing.
They do. And you either put on weight, your weight loss, your other life environmental factors as well. And it's not just about that. If you put on weight, you've got to increase the dose. There's a lot, long-acting, slow-acting. There's a lot of other things to consider when you're considering medication.
Yeah.
But what about taking strategies and tools with you that you can adopt and implement anywhere you are, and they do still work? I just spoke about planning. So we will work through strategies in therapy on teaching them how to plan better. So maybe let's go, instead of put 20 questions on a page, let's go with 5 questions on a page, because the minute an ADHD brain sees 20 on a page, that's it. I can't do it. I'm blocked off. I've procrastinated. So we'll teach them, let's go with 5 on a page. And on that 5, highlight the 2 you're going to start with.
Yeah.
Go through files. Let's organise your files. How would you work through that? A tablet's not going to do that for you. It's going to slow you down, but you still need skills that you need to use alongside. If you choose medication, which is fine, some people need it. But if you're choosing medication, you still need therapeutic tools that you will use alongside those. We're talking about, we do in therapy, for example, exercises which improve attention span. Looking at a card, finding the similarities in the cards. It looks like a game, right? But guess what? There's so much to it. We'll play a game of Uno, and people are like, you're playing Uno. Well, yeah. But guess what Uno entails? A lot of planning, organisation, higher order thinking. How do I set the cards up? What cards should I put next? Slows you down. Slow down. Don't put that card. Work on stopping and having the traffic light. I refer to the traffic light all the time. Why do we stop on a red light? It's safe. We know it's safe to. But the minute we go, even if we shouldn't go, and we go, you're at higher risk of getting hurt or having an accident.
Yeah.
So stop, think. Stop is red. Yellow is the think. Green is the go.
So what, like, to continue with the analogy, someone with ADHD, it's almost like it's
they
always
just go.
green.
It's always green.
Or whether it's red or green, they just keep going.
Go.
Right.
They don't have that stop, think, do. They just do it. And then they think later because something didn't work out for them, and therefore they're like, oh no, what did this happen for? And the whole self-doubt comes in, and then the criticism and the self-esteem and confidence just gets crushed. So with therapy, we teach them to do the stop, think, do. Plan for it. You want to do it. You've got this thought. Now stop. What is that stop going to do for you? It's going to help you think, is this something I do or not do? If I do it, what are my options? If I don't, what are my options? The average person without ADHD can do that. The ADHD brain does not do it. They just do. Then they think later after the consequence of their decision. So that's, you asked about medication. Medication works to a certain degree, but there are a lot of other things that need to be done. That need to be done alongside medication.
Yeah.
Some people have to have the medication, which is fine, but you need to do other things that would improve your lifestyle.
Yeah.
If you are going to make changes and more consistent changes.
Do you feel ADHD is overdiagnosed?
Again, when we diagnose, we are very careful and cautious in the way we diagnose. For example, if we've got a child in and they've come in for referral for ADHD assessment, we don't diagnose just based on what they present with us or what the parent says. We need a teacher input as well. So that's where we send the forms out to the teachers, because they need to exhibit the behaviours across both environments and both settings. And generally the way we make our decision is if a child is inattentive, hyperactive, not completing work, procrastinating, out of his seat, fidgety, have behavioural issues both at home and school, and both respondents have showed that, then we say pretty much tick the box, they're across both two settings. If the parent says this is behaviour we only see at home, and the teachers say there is nothing, he's a top student, he does his work, he's compliant, he's helpful, and he helps other kids, then we'd say it's more likely to be a parenting issue. Then if we have it at school and parents say, I don't see any of this behaviour at home, then we say, well, then it might be a learning difficulty. Okay. So before we jump, so I wouldn't say it's overdiagnosed, because we're very, very careful with the way we diagnose.
Well, you might be, but does that mean everyone
this is what we do with the DSM-5.
Okay.
And this is where we're only allowed to diagnose off that. And in order for a diagnosis to be made, that criteria needs to be met. And so we take very careful consideration all those factors. And, to answer your question, I don't think it's overdiagnosed. I think, again, there's a lot of information out there about it now. And so people are able to screen for it easier and then make those referrals. Yeah. And again, we don't encourage medication all the time. Honestly, I've had kids who come in and we've got them quite great where they need to be. And not because of us. I've got to say it's the parents. The parents are absolutely amazing. We give the strategies. We see them once a week or once every 2 weeks. It's the parents that are doing an amazing job at consistently following through with the strategies we give them. And so we've had conversations about, should I medicate? I'm like, well, okay, you're going to medicate, but they're doing their work and the adjustments in school are being made and this kid is showing steady, pleasing progress. Why would we medicate? Oh, to move him up from a B to an A. How important is that? Because we haven't got a D student.
Yeah.
So we're steadily making that progress. So we don't necessarily go ahead and say, go consider medication. We go through the therapeutic intervention strategies. We let the parents trial it out, and then we have a discussion about the medication.
The reason I ask is because I remember a few years ago I read this article about ADHD diagnosis. It might have been in the United States, by the way, and how there's been a rise in sort of, especially boys, school-level boys, being diagnosed and medicated. And I've got some controversial sort of views about school. I've always sort of held the belief that I believe school is for girls in the sense that the way school runs, the way it's standardized, the way it operates, girls generally are able to perform a lot better. I feel like boys are less likely to be able to sit in rows, sit on a desk, focus for long periods of time without tapping their foot, without tapping a pen, without standing up, without fidgeting. And I don't feel those things are always a bad thing. Like I used to say tutor kids maths, and what I had these two boys that would come to tutoring and they didn't sit the whole time. In fact, they worked standing up because that's just how they felt comfortable, working. Girls generally perform better in school. There are more girls at university. And I feel like we lose a lot of boys to academia or from academia because they're told from a young age, you fidget too much, you move too much, you do this too much. School isn't for you. Whereas it's more so how it's done. Well, there's no one to blame per se. It's just how it is. I mean, we have to have a standardized system. But I just feel like school benefits girls a lot more in that generally, obviously we're generalizing a lot here, but generally girls have the skills and qualities that better perform in the school environment. And so when boys are not performing in that school environment, they're more likely to be looked at like there's something wrong with them. Now, if it's the case that, you know, hey, it's very rare that we're misdiagnosing him, that's great. But I think it can sometimes just be the rhetoric around it. You know, like I have one of my siblings, he was told, oh, you might have ADHD like 15 times. It's like, why? Just because he bounces his leg when he sits down, you know? So
and what does it matter if he's bouncing around a little bit but still getting his work done?
Well, yeah.
He's still functioning.
Yeah.
So I can see how people would perceive, oh, you've given that's going back to the label kind of mentality. Oh, you're just getting a label, ADHD. Yeah. He's still doing his work and he's functioning. So then it doesn't become a problem for him. But we're talking about the ones that come through that have significant problems.
Yeah, of course.
But you're right, boys are a lot more extroverted in the classroom, and especially in, for example, the co-ed system where boys have this, impression to uphold in front of the girls and vice versa, by the way, but the boys more so. And so they got to arc up to the teachers or be more masculine in front of the girls to show that they've got this power. And so they don't do the work as much, or they become more distracted, or they're more fidgety in the classroom. Yes, but again, there's a lot of predisposing conditions, symptoms that we need to consider before that diagnosis is made.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if we're just basing it on boys in general, we'd say all boys have got ADHD.
Well, that's the thing. Sometimes it feels that way, you know. And like obviously, I mean, the whole schooling thing is probably for another conversation, but like I've always been frustrated with that, because I remember in school I was quite academic. I'd get my work done, and you know, the most I do is probably talk a little bit too much, but I was getting my work done. I'm performing well, but I would get frustrated when I'd see a kid that be told, hey, you need to sit down, shut up, stop doing this, stop doing that. Like we tell them to stop doing a lot of things, and they might actually learn better if they have a little bit more breathing room and flexibility. And sometimes they have to stand up at the board and pace and do all these things to think. You know, I still pace until now. I pace around when I'm thinking about things.
Or play with your pen when you're talking.
Or play. I actually fidget a lot. My desk at home, I have all these different things that I fidget with.
It helps you function.
Because
I'll be on a phone conversation and I scribble over the paper 1,000 times. You know, but it goes back. I'm going to touch on parenting again.
That's a Lebanese parent thing, by the way.
The pen.
It's always drawing.
The parenting factor again comes into play here, Francis, is that, for example, if you've got a little kid and you find that they're jumping from one activity to the other, keep them in that activity until they complete it. They may not like it, they might get bored with it. But again, we're just teaching them that they need to sit through something to its entirety before we move on.
Yeah.
Again, so that when they're adults, they can have more control of that.
Right.
And I think it's really important that from a young age, we constantly offering more and more different stuff just to keep the kid entertained or quiet. No, teach them how to become engaged in that activity so that they can finish it and complete it. And then what they're learning now is I have the ability to plan and organise that task and finish it to its entirety and successfully move on to the other one.
So like if you give them a puzzle to do, they start off excited, and then 10 minutes later, like, I'm bored and it's a quarter
let's
finish.
Let's finish it. I'll sit with them and I'll finish it with them.
Yeah.
Because I want to teach them that they've started. Let's finish it and then we can move on. Because we're going to get bored in life with everything. So let them learn again from a younger age. They need to finish something, and this is how we do it. So we model it to them. Sit with them on the ground, finish that puzzle, pack it away and say, now we can choose something else. Kids who jump from one play to the other. No, let's finish. You've got a few options here, but let's finish playing with this one and then we'll take the other one. This, then that.
Yeah.
It just helps them know that they're going to get what they want, but we're controlling that impulsiveness from jumping from one thing to the other.
Yeah, I feel like kids are worse when they have too many options of toys to play with.
I always stick to two. Two options. Anything in life, two options. You got this or that. Choose. Because we want to teach them, finish this, then you can have that. There's nothing wrong with that. You're still going to get what you want. But if you're so impulsive and you're driven and you're active and you're jumping from one thing to the other, you're not finding interest in anything. How are they going to find interest in things if we don't let them see it through? Get them to see it through. They might establish that interest. That's something also maybe parents should consider as well.
Yeah. Is this So are you telling me this is why I dropped out of uni?
I don't know. It could be. You'd have to ask your parents then.
Yeah. For like half of that time you're talking, I'm like, I think she's talking to me. So,
okay, there you are.
Yeah. Look, you know what? I think I did struggle with that when I was younger, is that I would sort of jump a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and people sort of joke, Francis with another great idea of what he wants to do. So, and I think it did sort of carry through. It did make it very hard for me to see things to completion.
I just, it's something we can do from such a early on age.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost much time or energy or money, just a bit of time with your child, which is also creating great connections with your child.
Yeah.
Go for it.
And I mean, even if it does cost time and energy, like
nothing wrong with it.
For your kids' growth.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. But we're just talking about the simplest thing is, and it's not simple in hindsight, it's actually quite significant, is that you sit with them and you model it and you show them how it's done. That we finish one thing, then we move on to the other. It's so important.
Yeah.
It's
a good tip. Yeah. All right, let's go to our questions.
Yep.
We've got a few here. Well, like I said, we probably won't get through all of them. We had a lot sort of sent through. All right, we'll start with the first one. Do you think there is undue pressure placed on older siblings to be big before they're ready?
I'd say in today's society there certainly is, especially given that a lot of parents are working parents these days too. So if you've got an older sibling, you're giving them the pressure of looking after the younger siblings. Also, if, being the older sibling, you're the older sibling, you need to role model what it's like to be an older sibling. You shouldn't be acting that way, but we're forgetting that they're still children themselves.
Yeah.
And we need to consider that. You let them be that kid. And big advice for parents, your child is going to be a parent one day. They don't need to be a parent at 10 or 8.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about not giving them responsibilities. It's really important to look after or mind their sibling if you're in the shower or if you just got to go outside to the car and get something. But to give them that undue pressure or the extra pressure, or the sense of what if I fail, or that anxiety that's built up that, oh my God, there's an expectation now that I've got to be a great parent, but you're only 10. Causes a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
So let's just let them be their age, but absolutely keep them engaged with their younger siblings, but also bear in mind that they are still children and they have a right to be a child.
That's an interesting point, the fear of failure. I've always sort of thought, and this is just my personal thoughts, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but you shouldn't want your kid to be scared of failing because it suppresses their creativity. That's right. You got to let them give things a crack, and failing's a part of it, sort of thing.
They certainly need to know that mistakes are okay. Yeah. Mistakes help us learn and grow. But when it comes to putting the pressure on as being the older sibling, I think there's just that additional pressure that, for example, if you're leaving them to look after their siblings, because they're the older sibling, for example. This is one of the many examples that might put pressure on the older sibling to do, is that they then know that they've got certain expectations they need to fulfill, obligations in terms of responsibilities. And being responsible for children is a big deal, only because there is that pressure. What if the other child doesn't listen? Who's going to be held the responsibility? Who's going to hold that responsibility when something doesn't go right? The older sibling. And they still might be only 10. So just making sure that we constantly remind ourselves they are children, and that if they have a meltdown for whatever reason they have it, they're still children. Not because they're older, they're not going to have emotions, or they're not going to be disappointed, or they're not going to be scared. Yeah. It's about nurturing them through that and being gentle enough to allow them to still be children, but also fulfill their older sibling role anyway.
Do you think putting too much pressure on them to be the older one or take up some semblance of parental responsibility can also affect the dynamic between siblings in that they're no longer equal?
Absolutely.
Because something I see now in society where like parents want to treat their kids as equals, like almost in the sense of authority. It's like, no, we're not equals. Yeah. Like, I'm your parent and I love you and I'll care for you, but we are not the same.
That's right.
Like there are things I can do that you cannot,
And this really important point. I think they need to also bear in mind that it causes sibling rivalry.
Exactly, yeah.
And sometimes in the long run, there might be a little bit of resentment towards the other sibling. So we need to be nurturing of the fact that they are still just siblings.
Or like an arrogance where the older one might think,
I'm your older sibling,
yeah.
You need to listen to me.
Yeah.
And then you want to tell them next time, you've got no right to talk to your brother like that. Yeah, but before you put me in charge.
You put me in charge,
So, be consistent in that message, that's all.
Yeah. Okay, we had two questions here about the gentle parenting versus traditional or strict, which we've spoken about at length, so we can keep going. We've got two questions here. I've got one that says, what do you think about screen time for children? And another one, what is the best age to start exposing children to technology and why? Maybe we can combine those.
Yeah. So we spoke earlier about child development and when we look out for communication. After the age of 2, we want to see communication happening quite rapidly and nicely at a nice age, at a nice rate. So if we've got a child under 2 sitting on a device all day long, they're not learning anything. They're not learning from their environment. They're not learning to communicate. They're not learning to interact and engage with others. So under the age of 2, I would really avoid extended time on devices and keep them engaged in learning and playing like kids used to before. We used to have kids build blocks and play with, cars and train tracks and be creative in their play and imaginative play. Now we've got under 2 sitting on a device all day watching, YouTube videos and just nonsense YouTube videos that teach them absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So content and age contribute significantly to a child's development. And if it's under 2, that development's not going to happen so nicely. After 2, when they've been exposed to, and I do recommend after the age of 2, not before, device exposure could be beneficial in that there's apps that engage a child in learning. But it's all about boundaries. Yeah. How much time do we give them? Because we still want them to have screen time and enjoy it, but also learn from the apps and the opportunities we can let them learn from the programs that they watch, but also engage them in conversations and play and imagination and that. And that's not going to happen if they're behind a screen. So after the age of 2, boundaries in place and remembering that content is really important. What are they watching? It's got to be useful content that's going to enrich their growth, not limit their development.
So what's a good, I know it's hard to put an exact time that's good or bad, but I mean, is it like an hour a day, half an hour a day, 3 hours a day? What would be sort of
it's funny.
threshold?
We can say 3 hours a day and then a parent might let them say 3 hours straight, right? But if we implement it after, for example, as a reward, or, you finish eating, you've had your shower, you get half an hour screen time, then you could break those 3 hours up or those 2 hours up. It just depends on it's very individualized.
So it's sort of how you administer it as well.
It's how you administer it, and it's also about your lifestyle. If you've got sports and soccer and football and basketball and you've got cooking dinner and you've got reading, well, then you're not going to give them 3 hours after school, are you? And if they're 2 and up to the school age, starting school age, then you also want to engage them in play and going outside, utilizing the equipment outside, reading a storybook with you. You don't want them behind the screen. So for 2 up to school age, I'd say an hour a day. Break it up. It doesn't even have to be the whole hour.
Yeah.
But the less time on screen time, the more time on being creative.
Yeah.
Just remember that. There's no creativity behind the iPad or watching the device.
Yeah.
There is when they're older, maybe.
Yeah. I suppose it's like a mindset thing as well, because maybe don't treat it as something you have to slot into the day. Maybe it's like, hey, after we've done everything that's important, if we got 20 minutes, we can slide some in, and you know what? We might not have time for that 20 minutes and the kid should be fine.
And that's fine. Again, accepting no. Move on from it.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, that answers both of those. I've got one here. Things to avoid your kid having trauma into adulthood. I guess there was another question. There were a couple of questions about factors that contribute to developmental issues or behavioral issues. Maybe we can sort of combine them together. Yeah. What are some environmental factors that contribute to a child having trauma, developmental problems, or behavioral issues growing up?
So I think I got one of the questions here where it says, does trauma cause ADHD or autism as well? And that kind of taps in that. And I think it's really important to note that no, it does not. Okay. Autism and ADHD or intellectual disability are a condition that you're genetically born with. It's not something that's created because of trauma. Okay. But the trauma can certainly exacerbate the condition. Okay. So it's really important that we consider those as being separate. If you're born with ADHD, intellectual disabilities, or autism or anything like that, it's a genetic and biological factor there, not based on the trauma or exposure of trauma. The trauma only makes the condition worse because they're not going to be compliant, they're going to be more oppositional, they're going to be having more meltdowns, more dysregulated because of the exposure to trauma. Does that make sense?
Yep. So that's on the trauma element. So just generally, if we were to sort of summarize, what are sort of the environmental factors or
that contribute to trauma?
Not just, trauma or behavioral issues. Okay. So autism and ADHD, you've mentioned, sort of, they are genetic, but they can be, amplified. Yep. But aside from those, what else can we sort of avoid as parents?
I strongly encourage parents to create a supportive and safe, nurturing environment, but also to make sure we avoid any physical abuse. And we're not talking about strict parenting here. We're talking about abuse because you're just too busy to hear them talking, so then you just go in and demolish the whole house, or you start throwing things in the house. So we're talking about subjecting them to abusive language and hurtful language, being neglectful, not nurturing their needs, not validating their feelings is really detrimental on that trauma that could also result in behavioural issues as well.
Yeah.
Exposure to conflict and violence. You can have fights, but don't have it in front of the kids. Keep it separate. The kids don't need to be exposed to that. They only take the anxiety and the pressure from that. And that trauma there is not something we can just wipe off, because they'll be on edge all day. They'll be on edge at school. They'll be on edge when they see their friends, when they speak to their teachers, when they come back home. They sleep with this edginess all night long. You might forget about it when you've overcome your argument with your partner or whoever it is you're arguing with, but this child keeps and holds on to it and will remember it. And also lack of emotional support. It's really important to encourage open communication and validate your child's feelings and emotions, and having consistent and predictable behaviour. Don't be unpredictable and erratic in your behaviours and your moods. Making sure that just because you've had a bad day, it stops where it was bad, and you come home and you create a nurturing environment for those children, not to be subjected to what you've had throughout the day, to come bring it home and subject it onto them. Yeah, that's right. So there are things to also consider.
It's interesting on the conflict thing. I didn't realise how sensitive kids were to that until, I've got brothers, and it's very normal. Like, brothers, we get physical with each other, not in conflict, And so one time my brother, we were just talking and bantering, and then I sort of grabbed him and we're just playing, and his daughter just lost it. Yeah. She lost it. Yeah. As soon as we touched her dad, she'd just lose it. Yep. And I had no idea.
And that's in play.
Yeah.
And
it was in play, so but to her really it was not play, we were harming each other and so since then we've had to be a lot more careful how we interact around them.
It's so important.
Yeah.
Because they look out for everything. They can read your tone of voice. They know when you're angry or happy. That's why we change our tone. We want to let them know.
Yeah.
So imagine when you're having conflict with someone. Just keep it away from the children. They don't need to be subjected to it. Yep.
Yeah, awesome. Great answer. Okay, I have here, at what age would you say is best to start allowing your child into the wild? I guess at what age would you start to become a bit less protective and let them sort of, adventure out more, experience more? I'm assuming that's what this person's meant.
It is quite general, that one. But let's just talk about just generally building the courage and confidence in the child to start feeling independence. I think after the age of 10 is a good age to start letting them feel like if you've dropped them off at school, they can probably walk over to your car on the other corner and then slowly get them to go into Woolworths and buy a carton of milk. That independence teaches them responsibility. I spoke to you earlier about how up until today, I don't even go on my own shopping.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just because I've always been with someone ever since I was such a young child.
Yeah.
So depriving a child from that independence and to feel that they've got the strength to fulfill that task independently, we need to be mindful of that. So 10 minor independent tasks like paying for the shopping or getting them to go get you something from the store inside. And then when we're talking about adolescence, I don't know if there's ever a real age to let them out safely, to be honest with you, because you don't predict what they can do when they're out there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We give them boundaries. And as long as we've set those boundaries from a younger age, we hope that they're going to be disciplined. And I'm going to say it goes back to that parenting when you're younger. And you need to decide, if you read your child really well, whether you trust to let them out at 16 or not. And that's why I said, well, this is quite general. And because some people won't even let their 18-year-old out alone. Why? Because they know their child and they know that they will get themselves into trouble. So it is about...
Or you know what's out there.
Or you know what's out there.
Your kid
and it's
might
your
be
right
harmless,
to protect
but
them.
it's not safe out there.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember my dad always said to us, it's not that I don't trust you.
I don't trust
the people around you.
Same as my parents.
Which is fine. And I grew up understanding that. And I use that line with my children myself. But again, it is a very general question, and it is about really knowing your child and knowing if they grew up knowing what boundaries are so that they can respect those boundaries. You know, I've always said, if I want to be out in front of my children, I'll conduct myself in a way that I probably would never... I'd be extra cautious about it, just because I want them to take back from that this is what it's like to be in control and have boundaries. Yeah. Right. And they'll see that. And we'll have a conversation about how others reacted or acted on that night and the way we thought it was not appropriate. Therefore, this is what people would judge them about if they ever went out. We have those open conversations, especially with my 15-year-old, because I know that day is going to come where she's going to want to ask to go to a birthday party and it's going to be a late one. And I'm like, I hope that day doesn't come, because at the moment I can still say no. I haven't allowed her to go that far yet where she goes shopping on her own or to the movies on her own. But I do know that I've instilled everything I need to in her to know what boundaries are. Yeah.
You're just preparing her really for that day. Yeah.
And honestly, I'll give you an example today. I came home from where I was in the morning, and she had her tutoring lesson, and she was in the garage doing her tutoring, and her mobile phone was inside near the TV where she always puts it before she sleeps downstairs. And so I was so proud to see that she knows her boundaries. She knows that if she's tutoring and I come in and I found that phone with her, she was going to lose it. So she knew she's got to have that self-discipline. Yeah. And if you know your child, awesome. Yeah. If you know, it's not about just me in general. I'm just giving the example that it does come from a young age. And if you've instilled that in your child, you could let them out at 10. But you need to know your child, you need to read them well and understand if they know boundaries, and you can trust them enough to navigate problems by being mature enough to walk away from things that might put them in harm's way. Yeah. Yeah.
Just avoid the occasion entirely.
Know your child. And, my daughter's 15. I'm telling you now 10. I haven't allowed my child to do this independently yet and go out shopping on her own yet. And she's 15. So I'm going to say know your child and then go by that. And as long as you've taught them what boundaries are and discipline is, and they've got the resilience that even if something didn't go their way when they're out, and that they can pull themselves together and get themselves back home safely, then they'll do that. Then go with your instinct.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier in our conversation about, with the strict and gentle parenting, the balance, and how while you have to be strict and have boundaries, within those boundaries there's also a lot of love, a lot of care, a lot of nurturing. Where I find that's quite important is if your kid does go out and now they have done something wrong, or they're in a horrible situation just by virtue of chance, it's that loving and nurturing element which will make them comfortable to give you a call.
That's right.
Like I've always maintained, God willing, when that time comes and I have a daughter or a son, for my daughter to call me and say, Dad, I went to that party you said not to, and I'm scared, I'm scared, and I want you to come. Yep. Like that would make my day, knowing that she felt, despite everything, she could still do that.
There's the connection, so there's no judgment, and there's understanding, and there's nurturing, and that's really important.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, the next one is, let me just see here. There's one about, the factors of why there's more ADHD and autism diagnosed in the last few years. But I suppose
we've touched on that today in the sense that there's just more understanding and there's more people aware of what to pick up for and make those referrals.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have a question here about how important it is for a child to have both a mother and father figure in their life.
How important it is to have both parents. Again, it's about a nurturing parent, an understanding parent, and a caring parent. Ideally, it'd be fantastic if we can have both parents be that in the same household. But we don't have that all the time. We have single parents out there, and as long as a parent is nurturing, caring, and empathetically connected to their child, there's no reason why they can't still live a fulfilling life with that parent. It just means providing that setting is really important.
Yeah,
that's all. You can have both parents under the same household, and it's just drastically traumatic for those children. So there goes caring, nurture, and thoughtfulness out the window. So as long as the parenting is of that nature where it's caring and nurturing, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be that both parents have to be in the same household.
So, of course, it's fulfilling, but, I mean, there are quite a lot of statistics out there about sort of the outcomes of kids, especially ones that grow up without a father figure.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that tie into sort of an importance of having a father present? So obviously when we talk about these things, we're talking about the ideal. It's not to say if you're a child of a single parent home, you have no hope. No one's suggesting that. But it's sort of like, what is the ideal in terms of outcomes for the kids?
In terms of outcomes, I mean, we know that parents these days are so busy with life, and dad's work, mum's work. Dad takes the girls to dancing, mum takes the boys to footy. So there is still that input. Irrespective if dad is around or mum's not around, I always encourage that even if the parents are not living together and they don't live under the same household anymore, that they are co-parenting, because that father figure is very important in making sure that, I would like to refer to it as a holistic parenting approach. It's both ways. You got the support here or there.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's very important to have both. Does that answer the question there, Francis?
Yeah.
Or,
No, I think so.
So I think if it's not available, the gap's certainly filled. But it's ideal if we do have both.
Yeah.
Because each parent plays a different role. In that upbringing.
Which is I think that's the crux of it. The men have become in society quite disposable, and there's been a lot of undermining as to the role that men are going through their own sort of identity crisis. Men barely know what it means to be masculine anymore, because we're told, if you get angry, it means you're a product of toxic masculinity and have aggression or something.
That's right. But the vice versa is true as well. We've got the other side where women are quite aggressive, or but you're right. Men are judged in that category, unfortunately, and it makes it a lot harder for them to be or express themselves without thinking, I've got to be careful how I do it. So hence why they are being predisposed even in the household. So I think just remembering as a mother, it's really important to know that the child needs to have, assuming it's a safe relationship, and not based on your interaction with your partner or ex-partner. The parenting is totally separate.
Yeah, good point.
And that's something we need to also remember.
If it's gotten to that stage and
if it's gotten to that stage and they're separated,
what can we do to make sure we're both as involved as possible?
That's right. And I think that's a lot of relationships, especially when they go down the path of, breakup, that my personal experience with my partner therefore has to be my child's experience with that parent. It's totally separate.
Yeah.
We can be angry, we can be hurt, we can be bitter, but this child shouldn't be deprived of an opportunity to have a fulfilling relationship with either parent just because we've had conflict as a couple.
Yeah.
And that needs to be really, really...
Because you're just punishing the kid, really.
That's right.
Yeah.
And both roles are really important. They are very important. You just said earlier, if you say no, you go to your other dad. You go to dad. If you say your dad says no, you go to your mum.
Yeah.
And so the child needs to feel that's the same, even if the parents are not. And not that because we want them to not be mutual. I'm just saying that we need them to have somewhere to go to when they feel they've got nowhere else to go. And creating that feel that it's okay to be involved in both parents without being judged as being a good kid or loyal kid or disloyal.
That's horrible to put a kid through that. Yeah. All right, I have one here. Any truth to the absence of a same-sex parent predisposing homosexuality? Yeah.
I've thought very carefully before thinking about this question, to be honest with you, but homosexuality is not defined by the presence or absence of a particular sex parent in the household. It's no specific or scientific evidence to prove that. But we know that homosexuality is genetic factors there, and then there's environmental factors and there's hormonal factors. It's got nothing to do with the absence of a parent being present or not.
Okay.
The main point that needs to be taken from this is, as long as a parent is caring, nurturing, attentively there for their child's emotional needs, growth and development, and mentoring, then that's enough. It's not about homosexuality here at all, and predisposing that. No, there's not enough evidence to suggest that.
Yeah. I did have a question here about your thoughts on Sigmund Freud.
Oh, that's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very controversial topic there. Look, he's contributed a lot in psychology. If we just think about the unconscious mind and the role of, the child development and the childhood early experiences, and it continues to influence psychology today. But the other factors, such as the Oedipus complex and the sexual drives and things like that, very controversial. I don't agree with them, but there's an element that I would consider.
What is it you don't agree with exactly?
Well, the child relationship with the parent, and his the way he portrayed that concept.
Yeah.
Although I would, if I had to refer to that concept that he put out there, is that a lot of parents will say to you, she gets jealous when I'm hugging her dad. And I think that's what he was trying to portray back then, that it's just that extra connection.
Maybe just some context, because I don't know.
I've
heard of him. He was an Austrian psychologist.
He's a theorist in psychology.
For myself and people listening who might not understand, what is it you're speaking about?
So the Oedipus complex was where he talked about the father-daughter relationship or the mother-son relationship, and it being of a sexual context. And
like there's a sexual
drive.
To it.
Yeah, sexual drive there.
Okay.
But a lot of people would say that was just ludicrous, which is fine. And like I said, it's a very controversial topic. But I think what we need to take from that is that it really touches on the same comment that parents will say today. She gets so jealous when I hug her dad, or he gets really angry when I'm with his mum. And it's just because that child wants to have that connection, not in a sexual context, but just that they want to be so loved in that way, connected, that they look at that relationship and they compare themselves to it. But there's a very controversial topic about, the father-daughter or mother-son relationship being that of a sexual driven relationship. No, I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I've heard that he's quite controversial.
Yeah,
I'd never really looked too much into him.
He's also contributed a lot, like I said to you earlier, he's contributed a lot to the unconscious mind and the early childhood experiences and how they both today influence society and culture.
Yeah.
And they play a role.
Yeah. All right, well, I think that's all of our questions. One last thing, Quantum Psych in Bankstown, if someone has their kid who's exhibiting certain behaviors and they're just not sure, they don't know if there's a problem or not, what's the next step if they would, want to come and see you or someone that does what you do?
Look, I get a lot of calls about doing a psychometric, for example, an IQ test. I think my child's delayed. And I say, if they're at school and there's concerns, raise it with their school counsellor, get them to do the assessment there, because you'll be saving a lot of money in terms of getting it done externally. Get that process started there, because a lot of parents can't afford these expensive assessments. So start off with engaging your school counsellor and teachers and question if there is anything that they're concerned about or they're seeing the same concerns, and then engage a paediatrician, and then the paediatrician will do their basic assessment and refer on to psychologists. Or feel free to also look up my contact details on the
So
internet.
they can reach you directly?
Yeah,
they don't need a referral?
No, they don't need a referral.
Okay.
But we always refer sometimes to get that second opinion, just to make sure that makes parents feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
But they can contact us as well. And my details are on the internet. But just reach out, and if any questions, we can certainly try to answer those for them.
Yeah,
but
awesome.
if there's any concerns around, delayed speech, sensory aversions, behavioural issues where they're having dysregulations for the simplest things, not responding to their name being called out, not completing work, finding it hard to get in the shower, finding it hard to hold a conversation, social interaction, anything like that, and you've got any questions, don't hesitate. And we will try to help you out and guiding you in the right direction, whether it be to an OT, speech, behaviour psychologist, anything like that. We'll certainly do that.
Yeah, awesome.
Yep.
Thanks so much, Amanda. Honestly, we could have sat here for hours, I think.
Sure we could have.
There's so much that can be talked about, but thanks so much for coming on. your expertise, your experiences,
Thank
sharing
you.
your own experiences
I
as
really
well.
appreciate the time. Thank you, Francis.
God willing, we have you on again in the
I hope
future,
so.
honestly.
I hope so.
The more we spoke, the more questions I had.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
definitely
That's
a really
fantastic.
interesting and relevant topic.
Thank you very
I
much,
think
Francis.
everyone's going to be keen to listen to this.
I look forward to your
Thank you so
feedback.
much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.